Welcome everyone to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something I know so many of you listening have probably felt, because I certainly have. It's that really frustrating moment. You know the one where you understand so much English, like you can follow your favorite TV shows, you totally get the lyrics to songs, maybe you can even read some pretty complex articles online.
How you feel like you're making progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then when it's your turn to actually speak, maybe someone asks you a question or you want to jump into a conversation, the words just, poof, they vanish.
Right.
It's like your tongue suddenly turns to lead or concrete or something heavy, and everything you know is in there somewhere just evaporates into thin air. It's infuriating, isn't it? That feeling of having all this knowledge just locked inside.
It absolutely is. And believe me, you are definitely not alone in feeling that. It's a really universal challenge in language learning. We see it constantly. It's often called the knowing-doing gap.
The knowing-doing gap. Okay.
Yeah. Or sometimes people call it the input-output gap.
Right.
Basically, both terms describe that same frustrating thing. The difference, the disparity between your receptive skills, that's what you can take in, like listening and reading, where you often feel quite confident, right?
Yeah, listening comprehension might feel pretty strong.
Exactly. But then there are your productive skills, speaking and writing, where things suddenly feel much harder. It's like the information is hard to access, hard to actually use. It feels like there's this massive disconnect between your brain and your mouth.
Totally. A disconnect. That's the perfect word. I remember years ago, I was trying to learn another language, French, actually, and I felt this so intensely. I spent hours listening to music, watching movies. I was picking up new phrases, even started getting the jokes. You know, I genuinely thought, okay, I'm getting somewhere. This is clicking.
Right, that sense of achievement.
Yeah. But then, if someone just asked me a simple question on the street, like directions or the time, my mind would go completely, utterly blank. Just static.
Oh, yeah, the freeze.
Freeze. My heart would start racing. My palms would get sweaty. It was like, I knew the words were in there somewhere. They had to be, but they just wouldn't come out. It was this infuriating, almost painful disconnect. Like you said, brain knows it. Mouth doesn't cooperate. It feels like your brain has all the files saved, but the speak button is just frozen, grayed out.
The frozen speak button, that is such a perfect image for it. That's precisely what we're diving deep into today. Our mission for this session is to really explore why this gap exists. What are the roots? Are they psychological? Maybe related to how we were taught.
Okay.
But more importantly, we're going to uncover some really practical, actionable strategies, things you can actually do to bridge this gap. We want to help you get to a place where your spoken English flows as naturally, as confidently as your understanding does, turning that frustration into, a feeling of genuine, maybe even effortless communication.
Effortless communication. That sounds like the dream.
It's achievable. So let's get into this journey together. Let's stay upbeat, stay encouraging. We're building a bridge, really, one step at a time.
Okay, let's unpack this. So to start, maybe we need to tackle a really fundamental question, something we probably all think about. What does it truly mean to be fluent in English?
Good starting point.
Because I think for so many of us, maybe subconsciously, when we think of fluency, we picture someone who, knows every single word in the dictionary, has absolutely perfect grammar, speaks without making any mistakes, maybe even sounds exactly like a native speaker from London or New York.
The perfect ideal. Yeah.
Right. But is that actually the goal we should be chasing? Or are we maybe setting ourselves up for, failure, or at least frustration, by aiming for something that's maybe not the most helpful definition?
That's a fantastic place to start because you're right. That common perception of fluency, that perfect, flawless ideal, it often sets us up for disappointment. Or worse, it can lead to paralysis, where we're too scared to even try because we know we won't be perfect.
Yeah, the fear of not meeting that standard.
Exactly. But fluency, at its core, isn't really about how much vocabulary or grammar, in terms of sheer numbers. It's not about achieving absolute perfection. It's much more about how effectively you can communicate.
Effectively communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about being understood clearly by others and understanding them in return, all without, excessive hesitation or that constant, really exhausting mental translation process we've all been through.
Oh, the mental translation. We'll definitely need to talk more about that later.
For sure. But yeah, think of fluency as your thoughts flowing like a clear stream, not getting blocked up by mental roadblocks or constant second guessing. It's about ease and flow.
So it's less about the sheer volume of words crammed into your head and much more about the ease, sort of naturalness of using the words you do have.
Precisely. Think about it this way. Here's a useful analogy. Consider say, a 4 to 6-year-old native English-speaking child.
Okay, like my nephew.
Wow. Perfect. Your nephew, he can probably communicate effectively in a huge range of situations, right? He can tell you what he wants, maybe tell you a simple story about his day, understand jokes, negotiate with his friends over toys.
Oh yeah, definitely negotiate. Fiercely.
Right. He navigates his world verbally pretty successfully, but think about his language tools. Does he have a massive vocabulary compared to an adult?
No, definitely not.
Does he know all the complex grammar rules? Like, could he explain the difference between the past perfect and the present perfect continuous?
Not a chance.
Yeah.
He still says things like, I goed sometimes.
Exactly. His vocabulary is relatively small, and his grammar is far from perfect by adult standards. Yet, no one would argue that he isn't fluent for his age. He communicates. He gets his point across, he understands, he interacts.
Wow, okay, that's actually a huge aha moment right there. It's like, he has a much smaller toolbox, maybe fewer tools, but he knows how to use every single one of those tools really well, automatically, flexibly, without thinking about it.
You got it.
So the goal isn't just to keep accumulating more and more words, like collecting stamps or something. It's about deeply mastering the words you already have, making them feel like a natural part of you, not just something you looked up once.
Exactly. That child might know far fewer words than, say, an intermediate adult learner who's been studying vocabulary lists. But the child knows those core words extremely well.
How so? What does extremely well mean here?
It means understanding them deeply, intuitively. Not just from a definition, but from hearing and using them in countless real-life situations, through tons of repetition and natural exposure. Think about how many times a child hears simple words like go, want, play, mummy, daddy, juice in meaningful contexts every single day.
Thousands, probably millions of times.
Right. This deep contextual understanding allows them to use those words flexibly and automatically. They don't have to consciously search for the word want. It just comes out when they desire something. Now, compare that to how adults often learn. We try to learn many new words superficially, maybe from flashcards, word lists, 10 words a day.
Yeah, the word-a-day apps.
We move on too quickly to the next list without enough meaningful review or deep processing. And what happens?
You forget them. Or you recognize them when you read, but you can't actually use them in conversation.
Exactly. It leads to forgetting or just passive knowledge. We're trying to build this tall, shaky tower with weak bricks. Children, on the other hand, get tons of natural review. They hear the same stories hundreds of times, watch the same cartoon episode 50 times.
Oh, I know that feeling as a parent.
They're constantly revisiting and internalizing that core vocabulary and those basic sentence structures without even realizing they're studying. They're building a really sturdy foundation, brick by well-understood brick. It's quality over quantity.
That perspective really changed my own approach when I was struggling with French. I used to just collect words, always chasing after the next new thing, constantly feeling like I wasn't learning fast enough, wasn't doing enough.
The pressure we put on ourselves.
Totally. But realizing that depth actually beats breadth, that mastery of what I already knew was the key, it made me slow down. I started trying to truly focus on living with the words and phrases I was learning, using them in different ways, thinking about them. It suddenly felt much more manageable, less overwhelming.
And that's exactly the shift we want to encourage in you, the listener. True fluency feels like a comfortable home for your thoughts and your voice. It shouldn't feel like a heavy burden you're carrying or a constant performance where you're afraid of slipping up.
A comfortable home. I like that metaphor.
It's about having that solid foundation where your ideas can just flow effortlessly rather than feeling like you're constantly performing mental gymnastics just to say something simple, instead of feeling like you're building each sentence word by word with a little dictionary open in your head.
Yeah, the slow, deliberate construction.
Right. It's more like your thoughts already exist in English, ready to be expressed.
Yeah.
It's really about confidence, not perfection. And that confidence, crucially, comes from effortless access to what you already know deeply.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So fluency isn't about knowing everything perfectly. It's about communicating effectively and confidently with what you know well. Got it. So now we've sort of redefined the goal. Let's dig back into this big hurdle, this knowing-doing gap that plagues so many English learners.
Your frustration zone.
Exactly. I know I've been there so many times, understanding so much English content, whether it's a gripping TV show, a catchy song, or even a complex news article. I could follow the plot, understand the arguments, appreciate the nuances, even laugh at the jokes in real time.
You feel competent.
Yes. But then when I tried to say something, anything, even just give my opinion on a show, I just understood perfectly. I just feel utterly stuck. It's such a common and incredibly frustrating experience, like hitting an invisible wall.
It absolutely is. And a big part of why this happens, why that wall feels so solid, often stems from the way many of us were traditionally taught languages. Many learners, especially those learning English in a country where it isn't the main language spoken outside the classroom, what linguists call an EFL, English as a foreign language, context are taught using methods that, well, might inadvertently contribute to this gap.
Okay, how so? What kind of methods?
Well, think about the typical ESL or EFL textbook approach. It often focuses on superficially learning a large number of new words and phrases in each unit or lesson, maybe 10, 15, 20 words at a time.
Yeah, the vocabulary list at the end of the chapter.
Exactly. And the focus is often on moving through the book, covering the material. Learners quickly move on to the next list, chasing quantity over quality, without necessarily getting enough meaningful exposure or practice to truly internalize what they've supposedly learned.
So you cover the words, but they don't really sink in.
Precisely. This leads to rapid forgetting, or words ending up in your passive vocabulary. You recognize them when you see or hear them, but you can't actively retrieve and use them when you need to speak. You end up with this huge mental dictionary of words you sort of know, but can't actually pull out in conversation.
Yeah, that learn 10 words a day method always felt like running in place for me. You dutifully memorize the new words for today, but by next week, last week's words have just vanished. It's like trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. You're constantly adding water, but the level never really rises.
That's a great analogy, the leaky bucket. And this traditional approach often prioritizes learning explicit grammar rules about the language or doing controlled speaking practice exercises that aren't always connected to genuine communication or supported by deep comprehension. This can be really demotivating because you feel like you're constantly struggling, constantly making mistakes, constantly falling short.
Right. Focusing on accuracy before fluency, maybe.
Often, yes. In contrast, think about the underlying principle of how people acquire their first language, which informs some alternative approaches. Native speakers learn by being immersed, by learning things deeply through massive amounts of exposure and repetition, and truly understanding vocabulary extremely well in context. It's about quality over quantity, building that solid foundation rather than that shaky tower of half-forgotten words. It's about letting the language sink in and become intuitive, automatic, not just intellectual knowledge stored away somewhere.
Okay, so the way we learn often contributes to the gap. That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of things that slow us down and widen that gap, another major culprit for that slow, hesitant speech is something many of us do, probably without even realizing it. Mental translation.
Oh, this is a huge one, a really significant bottleneck for fluency. Mental translation is that habit of thinking first in your native language, forming your complete thought, your perfect sentence, right there in your mother tongue.
You construct it perfectly in your head.
Yes. And then you painstakingly, mentally, translate it word for word or phrase by phrase into English before you even open your mouth to speak.
Okay. I can feel myself doing that sometimes.
We all do it, especially early on, but it's essentially doing double the work for every single sentence. Your brain is having to run two complex language processes simultaneously or one after the other, and that is a huge drag on fluency. It slows everything right down.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, because I know I used to do this all the time, particularly in situations where I felt under pressure, like a job interview or meeting new people.
High-stakes situations.
Totally. I'd have this perfect, nuanced, maybe even witty sentence crafted in my head in my native language, and then I'd start this incredibly laborious process of converting each word, trying to find the right English equivalent, trying to slot it into English grammar structures.
The internal dictionary and grammar checker working overtime.
Exactly. But because languages just don't map perfectly onto each other, one-to-one idioms are completely different, sentence structures vary wildly, word order changes.
Collocations, cultural nuances.
Yeah, right. The whole process would often lead to these really awkward, unnatural-sounding sentences. Or worse, I'd get completely stuck halfway through because I couldn't find the perfect translation for a particular word or phrase, and the whole sentence would just collapse. The whole process was so incredibly slow and clunky. It felt like I had this tiny little internal translator inside my head working on an old dial-up modem connection.
Dodds, the dial-up translator, that's spot on. And that image perfectly captures why it causes so many problems. It's not just that it's slow, although the slowness is incredibly frustrating. It frequently leads to grammatical errors and, maybe even more noticeably, really unnatural phrasing. Direct word-for-word translation rarely works seamlessly between languages.
Can you give an example?
Sure, think about a simple idiom in English like, it's raining cats and dogs. If you translate that literally into, say, Spanish or French or Japanese, it would be complete nonsense, right? People
Sure.
would look at you like you're crazy.
Right. You need the equivalent idiom, not the literal words.
Exactly. Or even just basic sentence structure. In some languages, the verb comes at the end or adjectives come after the noun. If you translate word for word following your native language's structure, your English sentence will sound very strange, even if all the individual words are correct. This creates this constant internal translator that's not only slow, but also prone to making mistakes and producing awkward language. It prevents your thoughts from flowing directly and naturally in English. Your brain is expending all this precious energy on the translation process itself, energy it could be using to simply retrieve the English words directly and speak.
Wow. So the translation habit is like putting unnecessary hurdles in your own path.
Absolutely. It's a major fluency killer. And if that wasn't enough of a hurdle, there's another silent but incredibly powerful barrier that many, many learners face. Foreign language anxiety, or FLA.
FLA. Okay, I've heard of this. It sounds serious.
It can be, and it's definitely real. FLA is a significant psychological barrier, especially when it comes to the act of speaking. It's generally defined as a distinct complex of self-perceptions, beliefs, feelings, and behaviors related to classroom language learning arising from the uniqueness of the language learning process. More simply put, it's that specific feeling of unease, worry, nervousness, and apprehension that bubbles up specifically when you have to use or learn a foreign language, particularly when speaking or listening.
So it's not just being generally shy or being an introvert.
No, that's a key distinction. It's situation-specific anxiety. You might be a very confident, outgoing person in your native language. You might be comfortable giving presentations at work in your first language or being the life of the party. But the moment you need to speak English, especially if you feel you're being evaluated or judged, bam, the anxiety hits, and you might freeze up, stumble over words, or just feel incredibly uncomfortable.
That's really key, isn't it? It's not a personality flaw. It's a specific response to a specific situation. So what causes it? Why do some people feel this so strongly?
Well, research suggests it often stems from a few related sources. One is general communication apprehension, which is just a basic discomfort or fear associated with communicating with other people, even in one's native language. Some people just find speaking more stressful than others, generally.
Okay, so that can be a factor.
Another one especially relevant in classroom settings is test anxiety. The fear of performing badly, of being formally evaluated, of getting a bad grade. This pressure can easily spill over into any situation where you feel your English is being tested.
Right, like even just ordering coffee can feel like a test sometimes.
Exactly. But perhaps the biggest component for many learners is the fear of negative evaluation. This is the worry about how others perceive your language skills. You worry about making grammatical mistakes, having imperfect pronunciation, sounding silly or unintelligent, not being able to find the right words, or just generally being judged negatively by listeners, whether they're native speakers or even other learners.
Oh yeah, that fear of judgment. Who isn't worried about sounding silly, making mistakes, or just having people look at you with that confused expression that says, I have no idea what you just tried to say? That fear can be absolutely paralyzing.
It really can. And it often gets reinforced by past negative experiences. Maybe you had a harsh correction from a teacher in front of the whole class. Maybe someone actually laughed when you mispronounced a word. Maybe you tried to tell a joke and it fell completely flat because of your language skills. Or maybe it was just a look of confusion or impatience on someone's face that made you feel inadequate, like you completely failed to communicate.
Oh, I've definitely felt that clamming up moment myself after an experience like that. You put yourself out there, you try, you stumble, and if the reaction isn't supportive, or if it's met with that blank stare, or worse, a correction that feels critical, it just makes you want to retreat into silence, disappear, never try again.
It's such powerful negative feedback, isn't it? And it creates this kind of psychological tripwire. The next time a similar speaking opportunity arises, your brain remembers that negative feeling, that fear, and it makes you hesitant. You start avoiding situations where you might have to speak, and the time after that, the avoidance becomes even stronger. It reinforces the fear and creates a vicious cycle.
So it's not just an unpleasant feeling, it actively affects your behavior.
Absolutely. The impact of FLA goes far beyond just feeling uncomfortable in the moment. It actively undermines your confidence and your self-esteem as a language learner. As you said, it can lead to avoidance behaviors like skipping language classes, staying quiet in group discussions even when you have something to say, avoiding social situations where you might have to speak English. And this avoidance, of course, means you get less practice, which hinders your progress, which can then reinforce your belief that you're bad at English, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow, so the anxiety leads to less practice, which leads to slower progress, which confirms the anxiety. That's a nasty loop.
It really is. But here's the really crucial part from a learning perspective. High anxiety doesn't just make you feel bad. It literally creates a cognitive barrier. It can actually block your ability to recall learned material when you need it most, and even hinder your ability to process new input effectively.
Whoa, hang on. Anxiety can block memory recall. How does that work?
Think about your brain's response to stress or threat, the fight or flight response. When you feel anxious, your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prioritize survival functions and can actually interfere with higher-level cognitive functions like complex thought, memory retrieval, and language processing, which are handled by the prefrontal cortex. Your brain basically goes into lockdown mode. It's too busy managing the perceived threat, the danger of speaking incorrectly, to efficiently access your vocabulary or grammar knowledge, or to process the nuances of incoming language.
So it's not that the words aren't actually in your brain anymore.
No, it's highly unlikely they've just disappeared. It's more like your brain's access panel to that information gets temporarily locked down by the physiological stress response. Your cognitive resources are being diverted to manage the anxiety itself. That's why words you know perfectly well, words you could easily write down or recognize, just seem to evaporate into thin air the moment you feel put on the spot.
That explains so much. That feeling of your mind going blank under pressure. It's not just in your head, it's actually physiological.
Exactly. So reducing that anxiety, creating a feeling of safety, and lowering that stress response is absolutely key. It's not just about feeling better. It's about literally opening the door to allow your brain to learn effectively and to access the language you already possess. If you're stressed, you're simply not learning or performing at your best.
Wow. Okay, so anxiety isn't just uncomfortable, it actively hinders learning and performance by messing with your brain's ability to access information. That's huge.
Yeah.
So, if the act of speaking itself can trigger this much anxiety for some people, how does that square with different ideas about how we actually acquire language in the first place? Does forcing yourself to speak, even when it feels scary, actually help in the long run? Or could it potentially hurt by raising that anxiety barrier?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It seems like it. And this brings us right into a really interesting and sometimes quite heated debate among linguists and language educators. The relative importance of input, listening, reading, versus output, speaking and writing, in driving language acquisition.
It's a fascinating discussion, truly, and one that has really shaped a lot of how we think about language teaching and learning methodologies over the decades. On one side of the debate, you have researchers like Meryl Swain, who developed the comprehensible output hypothesis, often just called the CO hypothesis.
Comprehensible output. Okay, what's the core idea there?
Swain's central argument, based on her research primarily with French immersion students in Canada, is that learning, particularly moving from understanding to accurate production, really happens when learners try to produce language that's the output part. And in doing so, in the process of trying to convey their meaning, they often notice a gap in their knowledge. They realize there's a difference between what they want to say and what they can actually say correctly, fluently, or naturally in the target language.
So trying to speak highlights the problems in your own knowledge.
Exactly. And according to Swain, recognizing this gap then pushes the learner to consciously modify their output. They might try rephrasing, searching for a better word, or thinking about a grammar rule, essentially problem solving in real time to bridge that gap and make their output more comprehensible, accurate, or target-like.
Okay, that sounds pretty logical on the surface, right? Like the classic try, fail, learn cycle. You try to say something, it doesn't quite work, you notice the problem, you adjust, you learn. Did she break down how this output helps?
Yes, she proposed several functions of output. First, there's the noticing function. When you try to speak and struggle, it makes you consciously notice gaps in your knowledge or problems with your current understanding of the language. You realize, I don't actually know how to say that, or, the way I just phrased that sounded a bit weird.
Okay, so it raises awareness.
Second, there's the hypothesis testing function. Output allows you to try out your linguistic hypotheses, your guesses about how the language works. You say something, and you see how your listener reacts. Do they understand? Do they look confused? Do they gently correct you? This feedback, whether explicit or implicit, helps you confirm or reject your internal rules about vocabulary and grammar.
Like running little experiments with the language.
Exactly. And finally, she talked about the metalinguistic function. This is where output encourages you to reflect on the language itself. You might consciously think about grammar rules, analyze why a particular construction worked or didn't work, or discuss language form with others. It's that quiet reflection afterwards, asking yourself, why did that phrase sound awkward? Or how could I express that idea more precisely next time? It's a very active, cognitive, problem-solving view of how speaking drives learning forward, particularly for accuracy and complexity.
Right. So, for example, maybe I'm trying to explain a complex process at work, and I realize I keep using a very basic verb because I don't know the more specific technical term. That struggle, that noticing of the gap, might motivate me to look up the correct verb later and consciously try to use it next time.
That's a perfect example of the noticing and hypothesis testing functions potentially at work. You notice the gap, and you might mentally test alternatives or later look up the better option. Swain's argument is that this kind of cognitive effort involved in producing output is crucial for pushing learners beyond just passively understanding.
I can definitely see the logic there, especially maybe for refining your skills once you're at an intermediate or advanced level where you're actively trying to improve your accuracy and sound more natural. But there's a pretty strong counter-argument to this idea, right?
Yeah.
One that focuses much more on the input side.
Absolutely. And this is where Stephen Creation, who is a really influential figure in the field of second language acquisition, comes in with a very different perspective. He presents a strong counterargument to the idea that forced output, especially early on, is the primary driver of acquisition. Creation contends that the kind of conscious output modification Swain describes is actually quite rare, especially in the initial stages of learning, and, more importantly, that forcing students to speak prematurely before they feel ready, before they've internalized enough language through input, can significantly raise what he famously termed the affective filter.
Ah, yes. The affective filter. We touched on this earlier with anxiety. This concept really resonates with me. It's like this invisible emotional shield or mental barrier that pops up when you're feeling anxious, stressed, unmotivated, or lacking in self-confidence.
Exactly.
And when that filter is high, it literally blocks the comprehensible input, the language you're hearing or reading from, actually reaching the parts of your brain that are responsible for language acquisition.
Right.
It's like, imagine a bouncer standing at the door of your brain's language learning club, and if you're too stressed or scared, the bouncer just says, nope, you're not coming in, and the new words and grammar just bounce off.
That's a fantastic analogy, the bouncer at the club door. And Krashen argues that when your affective filter is high, your brain is simply too preoccupied with managing the negative emotions, the stress, the anxiety, that fight or flight response we discussed, to effectively process incoming language for acquisition. It's also too stressed to efficiently retrieve the language knowledge you already have stored away.
So it affects both learning new stuff and using old stuff.
Precisely. This is exactly why those words, seem to evaporate under pressure. The door to your mental dictionary, the door to your grammar engine, gets locked down by anxiety and stress. Therefore, Krashen argues, lowering that affective filter, creating a low anxiety, supportive, encouraging environment is absolutely paramount for language acquisition to even happen. If you're stressed, you're simply not learning efficiently, no matter how much output you're forced to produce.
That makes so much sense from personal experience. Those times I felt most anxious were definitely the times I felt least able to speak or understand. And Krishna had this great, slightly dark, but very memorable example to illustrate why just needing to communicate or being pressured to speak is completely useless if you haven't had the necessary input first. It's the helicopter test, right?
Right, the famous or perhaps infamous helicopter test. He uses this incredibly vivid thought experiment, apparently inspired by a Garrison Keillor story. Imagine you take someone who knows absolutely zero German, not a single word. You fly them up high in a helicopter over a large field.
Getting nervous already.
And then you threaten to push them out of the helicopter unless they start speaking German. Right now.
Laughs nervously. Okay, that's terrifying.
It is. But the point Krashen makes is this. If the theory that you acquire language simply because you need to communicate were true, if sheer necessity or pressure alone was the mother of acquisition, then that incredibly terrifying high-stakes situation should magically make them fluent in German on the spot. right? The need is maximal.
But obviously it wouldn't work. You just panic. You can't conjure a language out of thin air just because your life depends on it. The absurdity of it really sticks with you. It powerfully highlights how ridiculous it is to expect output, to expect someone to speak if they haven't had sufficient input first.
Exactly. It makes it abundantly clear that mere need or pressure or motivation to communicate is utterly useless in the absence of comprehensible input. You have to have taken the language in, processed it, and understood it first. You simply cannot produce what has not been acquired through understanding. Output doesn't create language from nothing.
Okay, so the helicopter makes the point. Input must come first. So what is Krashen's core idea then? If forced output isn't the key, what is?
This leads directly to Krashen's most famous and central hypothesis, the input hypothesis. He proposes that we acquire language, that we move towards higher levels of proficiency in essentially only one way, by understanding messages. That is, by receiving comprehensible input, CI.
Comprehensible input, meaning language that you can mostly understand.
Yes. Specifically, language that contains structures or vocabulary that are just a little bit beyond your current level of competence. He famously denotes this as I+1, where E represents your current level and +1 represents that next level of structures or words that you're ready to acquire. You understand most of the message because of the context, your existing knowledge, visuals, gestures, etc., and that allows you to figure out the meaning of the +1, the new bits.
Okay, so it needs to be understandable, but also contain something new to learn.
Exactly. And crucially, Krashen argues that this acquisition happens best, perhaps only happens effectively, when it occurs in a low-stress, low-anxiety environment where the affective filter is low. He suggests that high levels of language proficiency can be achieved primarily, perhaps even solely, through receiving abundant amounts of this comprehensible input in such a supportive setting, even without ever being forced to speak before you feel ready.
Wow. So just lots of understandable listening and reading in a relaxed state.
That's the core of it. He views speaking ability or output not as the cause of learning, but as the result of acquisition. In other words, fluency emerges naturally once you've built up enough competence through comprehending input. You don't practice speaking to learn to speak. You learn to speak by understanding, and then speaking becomes possible and naturally improves as your acquired competence grows.
Okay, hold on. So does that mean if I just passively watch Netflix all day with subtitles or listen to podcasts while I'm doing chores, is that the magic answer? Because honestly, that sounds a little bit too good to be true, doesn't it?
Tacos. The Netflix path to fluency.
Right. Like just immerse yourself passively, keep that affective filter low by chilling on the sofa, and eventually the words will just magically start flowing out of your mouth. Sometimes I really wonder if just consuming content, even if I understand it, is actually enough to get me speaking confidently. There feels like there's still a missing piece there.
That's a fantastic question, and you're right to be a little skeptical. It touches on a common misunderstanding or oversimplification of Krashen's ideas. While he emphasizes the primacy of comprehensible input, his theory doesn't necessarily advocate for purely passive, disengaged consumption without any active element at all.
Ah, okay. So it's not just passive.
Well, the input needs to be comprehended. That requires some level of engagement, even if it's just mentally processing the meaning. And while Krashen downplays the role of forced output in acquisition, he doesn't necessarily deny that output, especially self-chosen low-stress output, can play a role in developing fluency or automaticity once the language has been acquired. Think of it this way. Comprehensible input is the foundation. It's the essential fuel for your language engine. Without it, nothing happens.
Okay, fuel in the tank. Got it.
But it's often what you do with that input, how you engage with it, how you process it, and eventually how you activate it, that truly helps bridge that gap from passive knowing to active doing to speaking. You can't just passively absorb like a sponge forever. Eventually, you need to engage more actively to internalize it, to make it your own.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yep.
So input is king, but maybe we need to do something with that input.
Exactly. So let's transition now from the theory, the input versus output debate, to the really practical strategies. How do we take all this understanding and use it to actually build that bridge? How do we move beyond just understanding to actually producing language confidently and naturally? And our very first foundational strategy ties directly back to that idea of depth we talked about with the child learner. It's all about deep vocabulary acquisition.
Deep vocabulary, not just long lists?
Not just long lists. True fluency, that ability to use words automatically and flexibly, really comes from knowing vocabulary extremely well. It's about deeply understanding a smaller core set of high-frequency words and phrases, rather than superficially knowing thousands of words you can barely use. It's depth, not just breadth, that fuels fluent speaking.
Okay, so how do we achieve that depth? What does knowing a word extremely well actually look like in practice? Let's unpack this with that great example we often discuss, the word harsh. How would someone learn harsh deeply, like a native speaker might internalize it, rather than just memorizing a definition like severe or unpleasant?
Fantastic example. Okay, let's take harsh. The traditional ESL or textbook approach might give you a definition, perhaps severe, cruel, or unpleasant, and maybe one or two example sentences, often quite generic, like, the punishment was harsh.
Yeah, pretty dry.
Right. But to really know it, to feel its nuances, to be able to use it naturally and flexibly across different situations, you need to learn it from context, from encountering it in a variety of real-life situations. So let's imagine you're watching a TV show, maybe a drama, and in one scene a character is really angry and says some very harsh words to another character. Maybe they're yelling, being critical, saying things that are meant to hurt.
Okay, so first context.
Yeah.
Harsh words, eames mean critical, hurtful language.
Exactly. You start to get a feeling for harsh from that specific scene. It's unpleasant, difficult to hear, maybe unfair. But we absolutely don't stop there. That's just one tiny piece of the puzzle, one data point.
Right, because language isn't just one meaning in one box. It's richer, more connected than that.
Precisely. So next, maybe you're reading a news article or watching the weather forecast, and they talk about harsh weather. Perhaps there's a severe snowstorm with biting wind and freezing temperatures. Now, if you understood harsh words as difficult or unpleasant, you can probably naturally connect that same core feeling to this harsh weather. It signifies difficult, severe, unpleasant conditions. It's hard to endure.
Ah, okay, so the core feeling starts to transfer. Difficult, severe, unpleasant.
Yes. And then you might encounter other related phrases. You might hear about a harsh storm or a particularly harsh winter, or maybe read about pioneers facing harsh conditions on the trail in a historical documentary. It's all reinforcing that sense of something severe, difficult to bear, maybe even dangerous or bad. You see how the meaning expands organically, connecting across different topics, relationships, weather, history, all linked by this core feeling, not just by memorizing separate definitions. You're building a network of connections in your brain, linking the word harsh to specific feelings, images, and scenarios.
It's like building layers of understanding around the word, or seeing different facets of the same gem. Each new context adds another layer of meaning or nuance.
Absolutely. The more varied the context you encounter it in, the richer and more robust your understanding becomes. So let's keep going. Someone might talk about hearing harsh language. Perhaps a boss yelling and cursing at an employee, or just very rough, crude talk, still connected to unpleasantness.
Okay.
Or maybe after giving a presentation, you receive some harsh feedback. Not constructive criticism, but comments that feel overly critical, maybe even personal or unfair, painful to receive.
Yeah, harsh feedback definitely feels different from helpful feedback.
Right. The word carries that emotional weight. You might hear students complaining about a harsh test, not just difficult, but maybe unfairly difficult, designed to make people fail.
Or maybe a harsh judge in a competition, someone who scores very strictly.
Exactly. Or think about physical sensations. If you use the wrong soap or cleaning product, it might be harsh on my skin, leaving it feeling dry, irritated, stripped. Again, that unpleasant, severe effect.
Alex, that's so true. My hands have definitely experienced some harsh treatment from certain dish soaps. It makes total sense.
And then you can even hear it used in a more abstract way, like someone pleading in an argument, don't judge me so harshly, meaning don't be overly critical, don't be too severe in your judgment. Give me a break.
Wow. So, looking at all those examples, harsh words, harsh weather, harsh conditions, harsh language, harsh feedback, harsh test, harsh judge, harsh on my skin, judging harshly. It's all these varied encounters that make you truly fluent in that one word.
Exactly.
It allows you to understand its nuances and apply it broadly across so many different topics: relationships, health, work, education, weather, ethics, and more. And when you have that deep, multifaceted understanding, the word is much more likely to just come to your mind automatically when you need it, because it's not just a definition anymore. It's embedded in your brain through a network of experiences and feelings.
You've nailed it. It becomes part of your active, intuitive language system, not just a piece of data you memorized. And this is why focusing on high-frequency words and phrases first is so incredibly effective. Words like go, have, be, the, and, but also common verbs, nouns, and adjectives, maybe the top 1,000 or 2,000 most common words in English.
Why those specifically?
Because they make up a huge percentage, something like 80–90% of everyday conversation and written text. If you learn those core words deeply, using this contextual, multifaceted approach, you gain incredible leverage. You'll be able to understand and express a vast amount, because those words are the fundamental building blocks used in almost any situation. You get the most bang for your buck, linguistically speaking.
Right. Master the foundations deeply, and you can build almost anything on top.
That makes sense. And I think it's also really helpful to personalize your vocabulary learning too, isn't it? Beyond just the general high-frequency stuff. Absolutely crucial. While the core vocabulary is essential, you should also prioritize learning the words and phrases that are directly relevant to your specific daily life, your job, your hobbies, your interests.
Like if you're passionate about cooking.
Then dive deep into cooking verbs: chop, sauté, whisk, bake. Names of ingredients, kitchen equipment, learn them thoroughly. If you're into video games, focus on gaming-related terms and slang. If your work involves specific technical jargon, learn that inside out. This personal relevance does two things. It makes the learning process much more engaging and motivating because you care about the topic, and it makes the language immediately useful in your actual life, which reinforces the learning.
That makes perfect sense. Learn what you need and what you love.
Exactly. And this whole principle of deep contextual learning applies just as much, maybe even more so, to things like idioms and phrasal verbs, which often confuse learners because their meaning isn't literal.
Oh yeah, phrasal verbs. The bane of many learners' existence.
They can be tricky. But again, context is key. Think of a common phrasal verb like bring up. You can bring up a child, which means to raise them, to care for them as they grow.
Child.
You can also bring up a topic in a conversation, meaning to introduce it, to start talking about it.
Introduce a topic. Different meaning.
And if you follow basketball, a player can bring up the ball, meaning to dribble it and advance it down the court towards the opponent's basket.
Advance the ball. Totally different again.
Right. 3 distinct meanings. But if you learn them through context, you start to see a faint connection. Maybe a core sense of causing something to come forward or become prominent, bringing a child forward into adulthood, bringing a topic forward into the conversation, bringing the ball forward on the court. Seeing these connections, even subtle ones, through varied examples helps solidify the phrasal verb in your mind much better than just memorizing 3 separate definitions.
That's a much richer way to learn it. What about another one? Maybe like go out on a limb.
Great example. Go out on a limb. Literally, it conjures the image of climbing out onto a thin, weak branch of a tree, far from the trunk. What does that feel like?
Risky. Unsafe. You might fall.
Exactly. So, metaphorically, going out on a limb means doing or saying something that is risky, that lacks support, where you might face criticism or failure. For example, I'll go out on a limb here and guess that you're a fan of science fiction. I'm making a bold guess. I have no real evidence. I might be completely wrong. I'm taking a risk.
Okay, taking a risk based on little support. Makes sense from the tree image.
You can even use it ironically. Someone might say, wow, you wore socks that actually match today. Really going out on a limb there, huh? Implying sarcastically that it wasn't risky at all. Understanding the literal image helps unlock all these metaphorical and ironic uses.
That's brilliant. It connects the abstract meaning back to something concrete. One more. How about come out of the woodwork?
Ah, come out of the woodwork. Again, think literally. Imagine an old wooden house. What might physically come out of the woodwork, especially if the house is damp or neglected?
Insects, termites, maybe dust bunnies, things you don't necessarily want to see.
Right, unexpected, often numerous, and sometimes unwelcome things suddenly appearing from hidden places. So, idiomatically, when people or things come out of the woodwork, it means that a lot of them appear suddenly and unexpectedly, especially people who previously showed no interest. For example, as soon as she won the lottery, all sorts of distant relatives came out of the woodwork asking for money.
Ah, okay. Lots of unexpected people suddenly appearing. I get it now from the image. This deep, contextual, almost visual way of learning seems so much more effective than just lists.
It engages more parts of your brain, builds stronger connections, and reflects how native speakers actually acquire these expressions through lived experience and repeated exposure in meaningful situations. It's like that funny anecdote about the Japanese learner who mastered the phrase for asking for an employee discount.
Oh, right. Tell that one.
Well, the story goes that this learner deeply understood not just the literal meaning of the phrase, which was something like, "Are you perhaps related to the staff here?" but also its cultural nuance as a slightly cheeky or indirect way to ask for a discount, implying a special connection. Because he understood it so deeply, he could then playfully use it in all sorts of situations, even ironically when buying something small like a pack of gum, just to be funny. He owned the phrase. It wasn't just translated words.
That's perfect. It shows that deep understanding allows for creative and flexible use, which is a huge part of real fluency. Knowing the cultural vibe, the context, the playfulness, that's way beyond just knowing the dictionary definition.
Exactly. That level of nuanced understanding is a hallmark of true fluency. And this realization that deep understanding is key leads us directly into our next crucial strategy for bridging that knowing-doing gap, actively cultivating the habit of thinking in English.
Ah, yes. Moving away from the mental translation bottleneck we talked about earlier.
Precisely. This is about consciously breaking that chain of thinking in your native language first, translating and then speaking. It's about training your brain to allow your thoughts to form directly in English.
Now, this sounds crucial for speeding things up, making speech more natural, and probably reducing those translation-induced errors we discussed. But I remember when I first tried to consciously do this, it felt incredibly difficult. Like trying to rewire my brain. My thoughts just naturally wanted to pop up in my native language first.
Nods knowingly. It absolutely feels difficult at first. It is like rewiring your brain because you're forging new neural pathways. Your native language pathways are like superhighways used constantly for years. The English pathways might only be country roads at first. It takes conscious effort and practice to build them up. But the payoff is huge.
So how does it help exactly? What's the mechanism?
By thinking directly in English, you eliminate that entire slow, effortful step of translation. Instead of your brain following the path, native language, thought, mental translation, English speech, it starts to follow the much more direct path, thought, English speech. You're literally building and strengthening neural pathways that bypass your native language for the specific task of formulating thoughts in English. Every time you successfully think directly in English, you're paving that direct route a little smoother, making it faster and more automatic over time. You're upgrading from that winding country road to an efficient superhighway inside your head.
Okay, building the English superhighway. I like that. But how do you even start to do that? It sounds a bit abstract. Just think in English. Where do you begin?
That's a great question because it can feel abstract and overwhelming initially. Like, okay, from now on, all my thoughts must be in English. That's not realistic. But there are practical, progressive stages you can work through to cultivate this habit gradually.
Okay, stages.
Yeah.
That sounds manageable. What's stage one?
Start small. Begin with word-level thinking. This is super simple. As you go about your day, just consciously label the objects you see around you in English in your mind. See a chair. Think chair, not your native word, then chair. See a cup. Think cup. A tree, tree. A car, car. Just connect the English word directly to the object or image, bypassing your native language.
Okay, just simple labeling, like putting little English Post-it notes on everything in my mind's eye. I can do that.
Exactly. It's about building that direct link between concept and English word. Once that starts feeling comfortable, move on to phrase-level thinking. Start thinking in common, short, functional sentences or phrases, treating them as single chunks.
Like what kind of phrases?
Things you say or think often. Good morning. Thank you. Excuse me. I'm hungry. I need coffee. It's time to go. How's your day going? These become automatic units, like prefabricated building blocks. You don't need to construct them word by word anymore. You just access the whole chunk.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
not just individual words, but whole common phrases become automatic, like shortcuts. That makes sense. What's next?
The next level, and this is where it gets really powerful, is aiming for full English thinking. This involves narrating your own life internally or even speaking your thoughts aloud when you're alone.
Narrating my life, like a running commentary.
Exactly. As you do simple actions throughout your day, describe them to yourself in English, either in your head or quietly out loud. Okay, I'm getting out of bed now. I'm brushing my teeth. Right, what should I wear today? I'm making coffee now, need milk. Okay, gotta grab my keys in my bag. Walking to the bus stop. It might feel silly, but you're constantly activating English in a very low-pressure way.
Okay. Internal monologue in English. Does it help to imagine conversations too?
Absolutely. Mentally rehearse conversations you expect to have later. Maybe you need to talk to your boss or you're meeting a friend. Run through the possible dialogue in your head in English. What might you say? What might they say? How would you respond? You can also replay conversations that already happened, thinking about how you could have phrased things differently in English.
So pre-playing and replaying conversations in my head. Got it. Any other practical tips for encouraging this thinking in English habit?
Definitely. Try using a monolingual dictionary, English to English, instead of a bilingual one whenever possible. When you look up a new word, you see the definition and examples in English, forcing your brain to stay within the language, rather than immediately switching back to your native tongue for a translation.
Oh, that's a good one. Stay in the English zone.
And here's another fantastic trick we touched on briefly. If you're trying to think or speak in English and you suddenly can't recall a specific word, which happens to everyone, even native speakers, resist the urge to immediately switch to your native language to find it. Instead, try to describe the word or concept using other English words you do know.
Can you give an example?
Sure, let's say you forget the word corkscrew. Instead of mentally searching for the translation or giving up, describe it. You know, the thing you use to open a bottle of wine. It's metal and it twists. Or if you forget whisk, you could say, the tool you use to mix eggs quickly. This forces your brain to actively problem solve within English, strengthening your ability to circumlocute, talk around a word, which is a super useful communication strategy in itself.
That is a brilliant tip. Circumlocution. It keeps you in English mode and helps you communicate even when you have a vocabulary gap.
Okay, this whole thinking in English thing feels like exercising a specific muscle in your brain. Like you said, the more you intentionally use that English pathway, the stronger and more automatic it gets.
Exactly. It takes conscious effort initially, but gradually becomes more habitual. But you raised a really important point earlier.
Did I? Which one? You asked whether just thinking in English really translates into actual confident speaking, especially under pressure. You mentioned that sometimes you can formulate things perfectly in your head, but they still don't come out right when you open your mouth in a real conversation.
Ah, right. The gap between internal thought and external speech.
Exactly. And that's a really valid observation. Thinking in English is crucial for building that internal fluency, for training your brain's internal processing, for getting the thoughts lined up correctly in English before they even reach your mouth. It lays the necessary foundation. It gets the engine running smoothly internally.
Okay, the internal engine.
But to reliably bridge that final gap, to get those well-formed English thoughts out into the world confidently, naturally, and automatically, especially when you're interacting with others, you then need to activate those internal pathways through practice. You need to connect the brain to the mouth, essentially.
Connect the brain to the mouth.
Think of it like a musician. They might practice scales, chords, and complex musical pieces entirely in their head. That mental rehearsal is incredibly important for internalizing the music, understanding the structure, planning the fingerings.
Mental practice is a real thing.
It absolutely is. But they also need to physically play their instrument, the piano, the guitar, the violin, to develop the muscle memory in their fingers, to get the feel of the instrument, to translate that internal understanding into actual audible performance.
Okay, I see the analogy. Thinking in English is the mental practice, but you still need to play the instrument of speaking.
Precisely. So once your brain is starting to default to English more often internally, thanks to these thinking strategies, the next crucial step is, how do we then get those thoughts out? How do we practice the physical act of speaking in ways that are effective, but also, crucially, low stress?
Because we keep coming back to Krashen's affective filter.
Right. That anxiety barrier. If the practice itself makes us anxious, it might be counterproductive. Exactly. The how of your practice is just as important, maybe even more important, than the what. We need practice methods that actively build fluency, but don't trigger that paralyzing anxiety. We need strategies that keep the affective filter low, making the brain receptive and open, not defensive and shut down. Learning and performing happen best when we feel relaxed, safe, and maybe even playful.
Okay, so low-stress, active practice techniques. This sounds like the core of bridging the gap. What have you got for us?
All right, let's dive into some really effective, low-filter ways to activate your English and connect that brain-to-mouth pathway. First up, a simple but powerful one: repetition.
Repetition. Like drilling boring sentences. That sounds a bit old school ESL.
Ah, but I don't mean mindless, boring drilling of sentences you don't care about. I mean consciously and regularly repeating sentences and phrases that you find useful, interesting, or that you've encountered in your comprehensible input and actually understand and like.
Okay. Meaningful repetition. How does that help?
When you purposefully repeat meaningful chunks of language aloud, you're doing several things. You're strengthening the neural connections associated with those specific words and structures, making them easier and faster to recall later, moving them towards automaticity. You're also practicing the physical pronunciation, the rhythm, the intonation, training your mouth muscles. And, importantly, it builds confidence. Successfully saying a phrase smoothly and accurately, even just to yourself, feels good and reinforces your ability. It's like paving that neural superhighway we talked about. The more you drive on it, repeat the phrase, the smoother and faster the journey becomes next time.
I found this incredibly helpful when I was learning French. There were certain tricky phrases or verb conjugations that just wouldn't stick. But consciously saying them over and over again, maybe while walking or doing dishes, even if I felt a bit silly talking to myself. Eventually, they started to feel natural. They became mine. It wasn't about rote memorization for a test. It was about internalizing them, making them part of my active repertoire.
That's exactly the kind of meaningful repetition I'm talking about. It's about ownership and automaticity. Okay, next technique, another fantastic one for connecting, listening, and speaking. Shadowing.
Shadowing. Okay, I've heard this term. What exactly does it involve?
Shadowing is quite simple in concept, though it takes a bit of practice. You listen to a native speaker, maybe from a podcast clip, a short YouTube video, a segment of an audiobook, and you try to speak along with them almost simultaneously, mimicking their pronunciation, their rhythm, their intonation, their pauses as closely as possible. You're like their verbal shadow.
Whoa, okay, so not listen, then repeat, but speak at the same time as them. That sounds challenging.
It can be at first. You might start with just shadowing short phrases or even single words, and you probably won't catch everything perfectly. That's okay. The goal isn't perfect imitation immediately, but rather tuning your ear and your mouth to the natural flow of spoken English.
It sounds a bit like what babies do when they're learning to talk. They babble along, mimicking the sounds and tunes they hear around them.
You've hit on a key point. It leverages that natural human ability to learn by imitation. Shadowing directly improves your pronunciation, helps you internalize natural intonation patterns, the music of the language, gets you comfortable with the speed and rhythm of native speech, and crucially, it physically connects your listening comprehension circuits to your speaking production muscles in real time. You're not just passively listening, you're actively, physically embodying the sounds and flow of the language as you hear it.
That sounds incredibly powerful for developing more natural-sounding speech. Okay, I might need to try that one, maybe starting with slower audio. What's next?
Next is perhaps the simplest, lowest pressure technique of all, although some people feel a bit self-conscious about it initially. Just talk to yourself.
Okay, yeah. Admitting you talk to yourself.
Hey, it's a sign of intelligence, right? But seriously, talking to yourself in English is an incredibly effective, zero-pressure way to practice. You can narrate your actions throughout the day, just like we discussed for thinking in English, but do it out loud. Okay, time to make some breakfast. What do we got in the fridge? Describe your surroundings. Wow, the sky looks beautiful today, very blue. Or practice common phrases and sentences you want to internalize.
Why is speaking it aloud better than just thinking it?
Because it engages the physical speech organs, your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords. It makes the connection between the thought and the physical act of articulation. Plus, it removes the biggest source of anxiety, the listener. There's no one there to judge you. You can experiment freely, make mistakes, stumble over words, correct yourself, try things out without any embarrassment or fear of negative evaluation whatsoever.
It's true. It might feel strange or silly at first. I definitely remember having some bizarre, one-sided conversations with myself in the car or while taking a shower when I was learning. But it's incredibly powerful. It's like having your own personal, completely safe language laboratory where you can experiment 24/7.
Exactly. You're a private language lab. And very similar to that, another great technique is simply read aloud.
Reading aloud, like reading a bedtime story.
Sort of, but for your own benefit. Take an article you find interesting, a chapter from a book, a dialogue from a movie script, even just a few paragraphs, and read it aloud in English. Again, this physically trains your mouth muscles to produce English sounds and sound combinations that might be different from your native language. It helps improve your pronunciation, your pacing, and it reinforces the link between the written form of a word and its spoken form. You see the word, you say the word.
Okay, so it's like a physical workout for your mouth in English.
Pretty much. And if you want to take that a step further and get some objective feedback on how you sound, you can combine reading aloud or talking to yourself with our next technique. Record your voice.
Ah, the dreaded voice recording. This one can be incredibly uncomfortable initially, can it? Hearing your own voice, especially speaking a foreign language, maybe noticing your accent or your hesitations, it can make you cringe.
Yeah, it's sympathetically. Oh, absolutely. Most people dislike the sound of their own recorded voice, even in their native language. So it's definitely a hurdle for many. But if you can push past that initial discomfort, it is genuinely one of the most powerful tools for self-assessment and building confidence.
How so? What makes it so powerful?
Well, firstly, it gives you objective feedback. You can actually hear yourself as others might hear you. This helps you identify specific areas you might want to work on, maybe certain vowel sounds or sentence rhythm, or perhaps you notice you hesitate a lot before certain words. You can pinpoint things you wouldn't notice otherwise. But maybe even more importantly, it allows you to track your progress over time. Ah, okay. So compare recordings.
Exactly. Record yourself today, maybe reading a short paragraph. Then practice regularly and record yourself reading the same paragraph again in a month or 3 months. When you listen back to those earlier recordings, you will almost certainly hear improvement. You'll notice you sound smoother, clearer, more confident. Actually hearing that progress is incredibly motivating. It proves to yourself that your hard work is paying off. It counters that feeling of being stuck.
That makes sense. Seeing or hearing the evidence of progress is a huge boost. Okay, I might need to brave the record button more often. What else?
Another really effective technique, especially for organizing your thoughts and practicing expressing more complex ideas, is journaling or writing in English, and then speaking your journal entries aloud.
Ooh, combining writing and speaking. Interesting. Yeah. Try spending just 5–10 minutes each day writing freely in English. It could be about your day, your thoughts, your feelings, your plans, anything. This act of writing helps you structure your thoughts, find the right vocabulary, and internalize grammar patterns in a non-pressured way. But then take it one step further. Read what you just wrote aloud.
Why read your own writing aloud?
Because it bridges that gap we keep talking about.
Right.
You're taking thoughts that you've already successfully formulated in written English and giving them a voice. You're practicing articulating your own ideas and sentences, not just repeating someone else's. It helps you get comfortable with the sound of expressing your personal thoughts and experiences in English. It's like rehearsing for real conversation, but based on your own authentic content.
That's actually a really smart way to do it. You get the benefit of careful thought through writing, and then the benefit of speaking practice using content that's meaningful to you. I like that.
Exactly. You're essentially giving your inner English voice an external practice run. And remember, underlying all these specific techniques is the principle of making English a natural part of your life, not just something you study formally from a book. So find ways to connect English to your hobbies and daily routines. Aim for true immersion in enjoyable ways.
Right. Not seeing it as a chore, but integrating it.
Absolutely. If you love cooking, watch cooking shows in English on YouTube. Learn the specific vocabulary related to recipes and techniques. Try narrating what you're doing while you cook in English. Okay, now I'm chopping the onions. If you love video games, watch English-speaking streamers. Try playing games with the language set to English, maybe even narrate your own gameplay aloud.
Okay, becoming my own game commentator.
Why not? If you love music, sing along loudly to your favorite English songs. Pay attention to the lyrics, try to match the singer's pronunciation and rhythm. Change your phone language and computer operating system to English. Consume as much of your daily media news, podcasts, movies, social media in English as possible. Start with English subtitles if you need them, but challenge yourself to gradually turn them off as your listening improves. Create your own personal English bubble as much as you can.
Making it enjoyable and just part of what you already love to do seems like such a game changer. It stops feeling like study time and just becomes life.
That's the goal. When it feels effortless and enjoyable, you're much more likely to stick with it. And for those who want a bit more structure or perhaps interaction without the pressure of face-to-face conversation initially, online platforms and AI tools can be fantastic resources these days.
Technology to the rescue.
It can certainly help. There are numerous apps specifically designed for speaking practice, some using speech recognition to give you feedback. You can find online communities or language exchange websites to connect with language partners from around the world for low-pressure conversation practice via text or voice chat, focusing purely on communication and mutual help, not judgment. And now there are even sophisticated AI chatbots you can literally have spoken conversations with. They don't judge, they're infinitely patient, and they can be a great way to overcome the initial fear of speaking to a real person.
Wow, talking to an AI to practice English. The future is here. That sounds like a really safe space to start building confidence.
It can be, for sure. The key with all these techniques is finding what works for you and integrating it consistently. And remember, you don't need hours and hours of dedicated study every day. The real magic truly happens with establishing daily practice routines, even if they're very short. Consistency is far more important than intensity. The sources we looked at strongly suggest that even a focused 10-minute daily routine can have a profound compounding effect over time.
10 minutes a day. That sounds incredibly doable.
Right. It lowers the barrier to entry. You don't need to find a huge chunk of time. You just need to commit to that small window consistently. You don't need hours of study. You need daily moments of courage.
Daily courage. I love that. That's the powerful takeaway here. Consistency beats cramming every time.
Every single time. So, for example, what could a simple 10-minute routine look like? It could be structured something like this.
Okay, give us a sample plan.
All right, maybe. Minutes 1 to 3, morning, maybe while getting ready. Talk to yourself aloud in English. Describe your plans for the day, what you're doing right now, or just say whatever comes to mind.
Okay, 3 minutes of self-talk. Got it.
Minutes 4 to 6, maybe during a commute or coffee break. Shadow a short audio clip. Pick 1 or 2 sentences from a podcast, a news report, or a video you like, and repeat them along with the speaker several times. Really focus on matching the rhythm, intonation, and key sounds.
3 minutes of shadowing. Okay.
Minutes 7 and 9, perhaps in the evening. Record yourself saying that same clip or those same sentences you shadowed earlier. Just use the voice recorder app on your phone. Then listen back. Compare it to the original speaker if you like, or just notice how it sounds to you. Don't judge harshly, just observe.
3 minutes of record and review. 1 minute left.
Exactly. And minute 10, this is crucial. Just take a breath, maybe even smile at yourself, and actively acknowledge your effort. Congratulate yourself for showing up, for taking that small step, for being courageous for 10 minutes, and on a positive note.
Wow, that's it. Just 10 minutes broken down like that.
That's it. It's about building a tiny, consistent habit. Think of it like planting a small seed every single day. Each individual seed might seem insignificant, but if you plant one every day, eventually you'll have a thriving garden. It's the power of compounding.
That makes it feel so much less daunting. Anyone can find 10 minutes. Okay, these practical techniques are fantastic.
Yeah.
But underlying all of this, managing the practical side, is the mental game, right? The mindset.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This brings us to what I think is arguably the most crucial piece of the entire puzzle: mindset and maintenance. How you think about your learning journey, how you handle setbacks, how you keep yourself going. That's often the difference between success and giving up.
So where do we start with mindset? What's the most important shift people need to make?
Hands down, the biggest and most transformative shift for so many learners is learning to embrace mistakes.
Ah, yes, moving away from the fear of errors.
Exactly. We need a radical reframing here. Mistakes are not failures. They are not signs of stupidity or lack of ability. They are absolutely essential, unavoidable, and incredibly valuable steps in the learning process. Think of them not as errors, but as data points.
Data points, how so?
Each mistake provides you with crucial information. It shows you exactly where the edge of your current knowledge is. It highlights something you haven't quite mastered yet. It shows you where you need to focus your attention, or perhaps try a different approach. Instead of cringing, feeling ashamed, or shutting down when you make a mistake, try to get curious. Ask yourself, okay, why did I say it like that? What rule was I applying incorrectly? What's the more natural way to say it? See it as feedback, as guidance for your next step.
So mistakes are basically signposts on the learning journey, showing you the way.
Beautifully put, they are signposts. And every single mistake you make is proof that you are trying, that you are pushing your boundaries, that you are actively engaging with the language. And that act of trying, of putting yourself out there, is a huge success in itself. It takes courage.
You know, my personal mantra for language learning eventually became progress, not perfection. I had to keep reminding myself that the goal wasn't to be flawless immediately, but just to be slightly better today than I was yesterday.
That's the perfect mindset.
I remember once, years ago, I tried to say something really simple in French. I think it was just, I'm going to the store. But I completely mangled the verb conjugation and the word order. I was in a small shop, and the shopkeeper and another customer just burst out laughing. Not unkindly, I think, but it felt So embarrassing at the moment. I wanted the floor to just swallow me whole. I probably turned bright red.
Oh, that sounds
It
mortifying.
was. But later, I asked a French friend about it, and she kindly explained the correct way and why what I said sounded funny. And now, looking back on it, it's actually kind of a funny story, and it was a truly valuable learning moment. It taught me the right way to say it, but it also taught me that, honestly, most people are actually pretty understanding and supportive, even if they chuckle sometimes. And surviving that embarrassing moment made me realize it wasn't the end of the world.
That's such a brilliant story, and it perfectly illustrates the point. Viewing mistakes not as catastrophes, but as opportunities for feedback, growth, and sometimes even humorous anecdotes directly reduces that paralyzing anxiety we talked about. And when anxiety goes down, your ability to learn and acquire language goes up. Remember, the primary goal of language is communication, connection, not grammatical flawlessness on the first try. You just have to be brave enough to try, persistent enough to learn from the errors, and kind enough to yourself in the process. You're showing real courage every time you put yourself out there.
Be brave, persistent, and kind to yourself. I like that. Okay, so embracing mistakes is key. What's the next big mindset principle?
It links back to our discussion about daily practice, recognizing the power of consistency over intensity.
Right, the marathon, not the sprint analogy.
Exactly. Fluency isn't something you can achieve by cramming frantically for a week before a holiday. It's built slowly, steadily, brick by brick over time. You simply cannot cram for fluency.
So why is consistency so much better than occasional intense effort?
Because our brains learn best through regular, spaced repetition and reinforcement. Small, consistent daily efforts, even just those 10-15 minutes we talked about, are far more effective in the long run for building lasting skills and automaticity than infrequent, long, exhausting study sessions where you try to learn too much at once and end up burning out or forgetting most of it anyway.
It's like building muscle at the gym, right?
Yeah,
Going once a month for 5 hours won't do nearly as much as going for 30 minutes 3 times a week.
precisely. Or think of it like compound interest in a bank account. Each small daily deposit of practice might seem insignificant on its own, but over time, the accumulated effort grows exponentially. Or like a steady drip of water filling a bucket, each drop is tiny, but eventually the bucket overflows. It's that cumulative compounding effect that builds real fluency. Establishing a regular routine, no matter how small, helps automate the practice. It takes the decision-making out of it, should I study today, and turns it into just something you do, like brushing your teeth. It becomes a habit, not a dreaded chore. Your brain actually prefers these small, regular inputs. It helps consolidate learning more effectively.
So it's not about how much you do in any single session, but how often you show up and do something. That really does make it feel so much more achievable, doesn't it? Takes the pressure off trying to find huge blocks of time.
Absolutely. Anyone can find 10 or 15 minutes. And underpinning both embracing mistakes and being consistent is cultivating what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset and building resilience.
Growth mindset. Okay, I've heard this term a lot lately. What does it mean in the context of language learning?
A growth mindset is the fundamental belief that your abilities, including your intelligence and your talent for learning languages, are not fixed traits that you're just born with. Instead, it's the belief that these abilities can be developed and improved through dedication, effort, learning, and persistence. You believe you can get better if you work at it.
As opposed to a fixed mindset, which would be believing you're either naturally good or bad at languages, and there's not much you can do about it.
Exactly. If you have a fixed mindset, you might avoid challenges because you're afraid of looking bad or proving you don't have the talent. You might give up easily when you face setbacks, seeing them as proof of your inherent limitations. But with a growth mindset, you embrace challenges as opportunities to learn. You see effort as the path to mastery. You learn from criticism, and you find inspiration in the success of others.
Wow. This simple shift in belief changes everything, doesn't it? It fundamentally shifts your perspective from, I can't do this, I'm just not a language person, to, I might not be able to do this yet, but I can learn how if I put in the effort and find the right strategies. It's incredibly empowering.
It's profoundly empowering because it puts you in the driver's seat of your own learning journey. And this belief directly fosters incredible resilience, the ability to bounce back from challenges, setbacks, and those inevitable moments of frustration or failure. When you hit a wall with a growth mindset, when you stumble over a word or have an awkward conversation, you don't collapse and give up. You see it as part of the process. You adapt, you try a different strategy, you seek help, you learn, and you keep going.
Okay, so how do we actively cultivate that growth mindset and build that resilience? Are there specific strategies?
Yes, definitely. Research suggests several practical ways to nurture this mindset, both in ourselves and if we're helping others learn. First, normalize failure and mistakes. Talk openly about the fact that struggling and making errors is a natural, expected part of learning anything difficult. Share stories, maybe even your own, or stories of successful people, even famous polyglots who faced countless setbacks and failures on their journey. Make it okay to not be perfect.
So remove the shame around mistakes.
Exactly. Second, focus on constructive feedback. When giving or receiving feedback, even from yourself when listening to recordings, focus on specific areas for improvement in the process, rather than just judging the outcome. Acknowledge the effort and progress made, not just the errors. Frame feedback as helpful guidance for the next step.
Feedback that helps you grow, not feedback that makes you want to hide.
Precisely. Third, teach and use self-regulation strategies. Help learners, and yourself, develop skills like effective time management, breaking down big, overwhelming goals like become fluent into smaller, manageable steps, and planning learning activities. This helps avoid feeling overwhelmed, which can trigger a fixed mindset response.
Taking control of the learning process.
Yes. Fourth, encourage and normalize help-seeking behavior. Make it clear that asking for help from teachers, peers, mentors, online communities is a sign of strength and effective learning, not weakness. Everyone struggles sometimes, and learning from others is smart.
It's okay to not know everything and ask for directions.
Absolutely. Fifth, develop stress management techniques. Since anxiety is such a blocker, actively practice techniques like mindfulness, deep breathing exercises before a potentially stressful speaking situation, positive self-talk, I can handle this, it's okay to make mistakes, or visualization, imagining yourself communicating successfully.
Managing the affective filter directly.
Yes. And finally, maybe surprisingly, use storytelling as a coping mechanism. Encourage sharing personal narratives about the learning journey, the struggles, the breakthroughs, the funny moments. This helps process emotions, build connections with fellow learners, realizing you're not alone, and can reinforce a growth narrative. Reading stories about resilience can also be inspiring.
Wow. Those are incredibly powerful tools. And honestly, they sound like great strategies, not just for language learning, but for navigating pretty much any challenge in life.
Yeah.
It's all about building that mental fortitude, that belief in your ability to learn and adapt.
They truly are transferable life skills. And the last piece of the mindset puzzle ties directly into consistency and growth, the importance of goal setting and positive reinforcement.
Okay, setting goals. But you mentioned breaking down big goals.
Exactly. It's crucial to set small, specific, achievable short-term goals that you can realistically hit. Instead of a vague, overwhelming goal like, I will be fluent by next year, set micro goals like, this week I will talk to myself in English for 5 minutes every day, or tomorrow I will shadow one new sentence from my favorite podcast. Or, by Friday, I will learn 3 new phrases related to my hobby and try to use them.
Tiny concrete steps so you get frequent wins.
Precisely, and then this is key. Track that progress. Keep a simple log, put check marks on a calendar, use a habit tracking app. Seeing visual evidence of your consistency, even on these small goals, is incredibly motivating. And when you hit a goal, no matter how small, celebrate that win, acknowledge your effort, give yourself some positive reinforcement.
How can positive reinforcement help?
It strengthens the desired behavior. When you feel good about achieving a small goal, you're more likely to stick with the process. Positive self-talk is huge here. Instead of focusing on what you can't do yet, focus on what you did do. Wow, I actually practiced every day this week. Or, hey, I understood most of that conversation. And combine this with visualization, actively imagining yourself speaking confidently, understanding easily, enjoying conversations in English. Believe it's possible. These mental practices build belief in yourself brick by brick, reinforcing that growth mindset.
So set tiny goals, track them, celebrate the wins, talk nicely to yourself, and visualize success. It sounds like a recipe for building sustainable motivation.
Absolutely. The journey to fluency definitely has its ups and downs. There will be plateaus, moments of frustration, times you feel like you're going backwards. But focusing on these mindset principles, embracing mistakes, being consistent, fostering a growth mindset, setting small goals, and being kind to yourself provides the resilience and motivation needed to navigate those challenges and keep moving forward. Every small step forward, every minute of practice, every moment you choose courage over fear is a victory that builds towards the fluency you're seeking.
Okay, wow. What an absolutely incredible deep dive into understanding and bridging this knowing, doing gap in English fluency. This conversation has been so eye-opening for me and hopefully for everyone listening too. Let's try to quickly recap the main takeaways, the big pillars we've built during our discussion today.
Sounds good. Let's consolidate.
Okay, so takeaway number 1. We need to redefine fluency. Remember that real fluency isn't just about collecting thousands of words or having perfect grammar. It's fundamentally about deep understanding leading to confident, effective, and relatively effortless communication. It's about how well you can use what you know, not just how much you know passively.
Communication effectiveness. Pillar 2. We identified the major roadblocks. Anxiety, especially that specific foreign language anxiety, FLA, and superficial learning habits, like trying to learn too many words too quickly without depth, are huge barriers that create that frustrating gap between knowing and doing. Understanding these barriers is the critical first step to dismantling them.
Right. Know your enemy. Pillar 3. We found the path forward. Bridging the gap involves prioritizing two core foundational strategies. Actively cultivating the habit of thinking directly in English, training your brain to bypass that slow mental translation, and consistently engaging in low-pressure active practice techniques like shadowing, self-talk, reading aloud, recording, to build that internal fluency and confidently bring it out into the real world. It's about building new, more efficient habits.
Well said. Pillar 4, and this is a huge mindset shift. Mistakes are not failures. They are absolutely essential data points, unavoidable parts of the learning process that provide invaluable feedback. We need to learn to embrace them, get curious about them, and see them as proof of effort and opportunities for growth.
Progress, not perfection. And finally, Pillar 5. Consistency trumps intensity every single time. It's the power of small daily actions, that compounding effect of showing up consistently, even for just 10-15 minutes, that truly builds your language muscle and makes fluency achievable in the long run.
That's a great summary of the key pillars. You know, a useful way to visualize this whole journey might be to think of it like building a sturdy bridge across a wide river.
Okay, I like metaphors. Tell me more.
Imagine on one side of the river is all your current English knowledge, your understanding, your passive vocabulary. On the other side is confident, fluent speaking. And the wide, maybe turbulent river in between represents all those barriers. The anxiety, the fear of mistakes, the habit of mental translation, the feeling of being stuck.
Okay, I can picture the river. It looks hard to cross.
It can feel that way. But each day that you engage in these strategies we've discussed, you're essentially laying down strong bricks or planks to build your bridge. Each time you learn a word deeply through context, that's a solid brick. Each time you practice thinking in English, you're strengthening the supports. Each session of shadowing or talking to yourself in a low-stress way, you're laying another sturdy plank. Each mistake you learn from, you're reinforcing the structure.
So it's not about one giant leap across the river.
No, that's impossible and terrifying. It's about patiently, consistently placing one well-understood brick, one well-practiced plank at a time. You focus on making each small piece solid, deep understanding, consistent, safe practice. You trust that these small, steady efforts, day after day, will eventually connect you securely to the other side. You're building a reliable pathway across that river of anxiety, allowing your thoughts and your voice to finally flow freely, naturally, and confidently to the speaking side.
Placing one well-understood brick at a time. I love that image. It makes the whole process feel so much more grounded and achievable. You're not trying to conquer the whole river at once. You're just focusing on laying today's brick correctly and well. You're building a pathway for your voice to finally travel freely.
Exactly. It's about empowering yourself step by step to unlock the voice you have inside. Because ultimately, why are we doing this? Why learn English? It's usually about connection, isn't it? Connecting with people, exploring different cultures, accessing information, achieving personal goals, advancing professional dreams. Fluency isn't just about mastering grammar rules. It's about unlocking a fuller participation in the world, unlocking a new part of yourself.
That's a powerful reminder of the why behind it all. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave our listeners with a final thought, something to mull over. We've explored the gap, the reasons behind it, and a whole toolkit of strategies to build that bridge.
So the challenge to you listening right now is this. If you now understand these strategies, if you see the path forward, what is one small, manageable, low-stress action, just one brick that you can commit to laying down today? Not tomorrow, not next week, today. What's one tiny step you can take right now to start building your own personal bridge to fluency?
What was the one thing from our conversation today that really stood out to you, Wei? Maybe it was the idea of deep vocabulary, or thinking in English, or shadowing, or just being kinder to yourself about mistakes. Take that one nugget of insight, that one aha moment, and put it into action, even for just 5 or 10 minutes. Your fluency, that feeling of confident communication, might be much closer than you think.
Okay, let's dive in. Have you ever been deep in a conversation, maybe with a new friend, or even during an important work meeting, and that perfect word is right there,
Okay.
hovering on the tip of your tongue, A word you absolutely know, you're sure of it, but it just, well, it vanishes.
Ugh. That moment.
Or maybe you're happily reading an article in English and you're understanding every single word, feeling really confident, actually.
Feeling good, yeah.
But then you try to explain what you've just read to someone else and your mind just goes completely blank.
Totally blank. Happens all the time.
That incredibly frustrating feeling that knowing something, perhaps even deeply, but just not being able to do anything with that knowledge in the moment you need it most. Well, if you felt that, you're absolutely not alone.
Definitely not. It's a truly universal experience for language learners. And honestly, for anyone who's ever tried to retrieve a memory under pressure.
It's so true. That experience you just described, that immediate sense of loss, it really resonates with so many people learning English, doesn't it?
It really does. And that's exactly the heart of our deep dive today. Our mission, really, is to move beyond just knowing the definitions of English words and expressions.
Going deeper.
Exactly. We want to guide you on how to truly internalize them, how to grasp their subtle nuances, and most importantly, how to use them naturally and confidently in real-life contexts.
Okay.
This isn't just about, accumulating more words in some kind of mental list. It's about making them a truly functional, active part of your English repertoire.
Functional and active. I like that.
It's about empowering you to express yourself authentically, without all that hesitation.
Oh, I love that mission. Functional and active part of your repertoire. That's what we're all striving for, isn't it? It sounds like we're going to really dive deep into how these words actually feel, how they fit into our everyday conversations.
Yeah, the real use.
And crucially, how to get them from that passive understanding where you recognize them to active, confident use. That feeling of understanding something perfectly, but then finding you can't quite produce it yourself is such a common source of frustration.
Oh, absolutely.
I imagine a lot of listeners are nodding their heads vigorously right now.
I'm certain they are. And that sense of frustration, while completely valid, is also a sign of progress in a way.
Right. It means you're pushing yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It means you're aware of the gap. We want to reassure you listening that this challenge, this knowing-doing gap we'll explore, is a completely universal experience for learners at the B1, B2 level, and honestly, even beyond that level.
It doesn't just magically disappear.
No, it doesn't. You're already doing something wonderful just by being curious and wanting to enhance your communication. This deep dive is really designed as a practical shortcut, giving you specific insights and actionable steps to help bridge that gap between understanding and actively using the language.
Okay, so practical steps. Good.
Think of it as a friendly chat, filled with relatable examples and practical tips that help you make these words truly your own, transforming those moments of frustration into, stepping stones for growth.
Let's get started then, because that frustration of disappearing thoughts and knowledge is something I think every language learner, and honestly, every human, has felt at some point. It's genuinely infuriating when you just can't find the words you need.
It really is infuriating. It's such a strong feeling. Let's maybe zero in on that feeling of disappearance first. When you say a word vanishes, it's such an accurate description, isn't it?
It really is. Poof.
The verb vanish means to disappear suddenly and completely. We use it for things that were present but are just no longer there, often unexpectedly or even mysteriously.
Like your keys. Always the keys.
Exactly. Think about your keys. One moment they're on the kitchen counter, you saw them there, and the next, poof, they vanished. It's that sudden, almost inexplicable absence. And this applies metaphorically too, like a thought or a memory just vanishing.
Oh, absolutely. I've been there so many times with the keys, and it's always infuriating because you just put them down somewhere sensible.
Right. Where could they possibly be?
It feels like some invisible magic trick has been played on you, or like you said, the classic example. You're just about to say something really clever maybe, or profound.
You got it lined up.
Yeah, the perfect phrase is forming, and then mid-sentence, the thought just vanishes. Gone. No trace.
Nothing.
Or even simpler, you might see a smile vanish from someone's face if they suddenly hear bad news. It speaks to that immediate, complete disappearance, doesn't it? Leaving a blank space where something used to be.
Precisely. That suddenness is key. And building on that idea of sudden disappearance, especially for more abstract things like thoughts, memories, maybe even opportunities, we often use a more dramatic expression. Evaporate into thin air.
Ooh, I like that one. More dramatic.
It is. It emphasizes an even more complete and mysterious disappearance, almost as if something just turned into vapor, into steam.
Oh,
It conveys a sense of utter, inexplicable loss, often for something less tangible than, say, physical objects like keys.
I can totally relate to that, especially for those less tangible things like my brilliant comeback for that argument evaporated into thin air the moment I saw my boss's face, you know?
Yes. Perfect example. The confidence just goes.
Or all my worries about the project evaporated into thin air once I was finally on holiday. That feeling of something just dissolving, leaving no trace behind.
Yes, dissolving is a great way to think about it.
Particularly for mental states or emotional burdens, right? It's stronger than just vanish, isn't it? It implies a complete dissipation, like mist.
That's a great distinction. It does imply a more profound, almost ghostly disappearance sometimes. And sometimes, it's not just a specific word or thought that vanishes or evaporates,
What then?
but your entire capacity to think or respond. That's when your mind goes completely blank or utterly blank.
The dreaded blank.
Exactly. This expression means you're unable to think of anything, especially when you're trying to remember something or respond to a question. Your mind just becomes entirely empty, like a wiped whiteboard.
Oh, the classic exam scenario. You study for weeks, you know the material,
You know it.
and then you sit down, look at the question, and nothing. Absolutely nothing. Or when someone asks you an unexpected question in a meeting and your brain just hits a reset button, suddenly there's just nothing there.
It's like all the files just got deleted.
Exactly. It's like you're standing on a stage ready to perform and then all your lines just go completely blank. Or you meet someone new, they tell you their name, and 5 seconds later their name has vanished and your mind goes blank trying to retrieve it.
Retrieve it, yeah.
It's such a common and, again, very frustrating experience. Like your mental hard drive just suddenly decides to wipe itself clean.
It is. And that word you used, retrieve, is key there. To retrieve means to get or bring something back, or in this sense, to recall or remember information.
Like getting a file from a computer.
Exactly. It's that active effort to access information from your memory, from storage, like trying to get that person's name back from the empty space in your mind.
The void.
The void. But sometimes your mind isn't actually empty. It's just full of static.
Static, like on an old radio or TV, that fuzzy noise.
Precisely that. Metaphorically, for our minds, static means a lack of clear thought or communication. It's a kind of mental interference, like white noise that obscures the signal.
Ah.
So it's not that your mind is blank exactly, but rather it's noisy, fuzzy, unclear. And that makes it hard to grasp specific details or thoughts clearly.
So it's not an absence of thought, but maybe the presence of something unclear that prevents clarity, like trying to remember a dream, but your mind is just full of static, right?
Yeah, fuzzy images, disconnected feelings.
Filled with unclear noise, and you can't quite grasp the details, even though you know something significant was there. Or maybe you're trying to recall the specifics of a really heated debate you had.
Oh, those are tricky.
Yeah. But the precise words, the exact sequence of points, it's all just a fuzzy mess in your head because of all the mental static from the emotion, maybe.
That's a great example. Emotion definitely creates static. So it's less about the word vanishing completely and more about it being lost in the noise, obscured.
Right. Can't quite tune it in.
Exactly. Both states, a truly blank mind and a mind full of static, are incredibly frustrating, but for slightly different reasons. One is an absence, the other is a kind of distracting clutter or interference.
Makes sense.
And sometimes, after something vanishes or your mind goes blank, maybe you stop trying so hard and then things magically reappear.
Ah, yes, the magic reappearance.
Magically is the perfect adverb here. It describes something happening suddenly, wonderfully, or without a clear explanation, as if by, literal magic.
Yes, like finding something you thought was lost forever, those keys again, maybe.
Always the keys.
And then it magically appears right where you are certain you already looked 10 times. Or an unexpected solution to a problem you've been struggling with just magically appearing when you stopped consciously trying so hard to force it.
That aha moment in the shower.
Exactly. It's like the universe, or just our subconscious minds, are playing games with our lost words, sometimes hiding them, sometimes bringing them back in a flash of insight when we least expect it.
It certainly feels that way sometimes. And that struggle to retrieve, this whole feeling of knowing a word but not being able to use it, it brings us neatly to a really core concept in language learning, the knowing-doing gap.
The knowing-doing gap, okay.
Or sometimes it's called the input-output gap.
Yeah.
This is a universal challenge for language learners.
Right.
It describes the disparity, and that's a key word here, the disparity or significant difference between what you know,
What you understand.
right, your receptive skills like listening and reading, and what you can actually do or produce.
Speaking and writing.
Exactly, your productive skills like speaking and writing.
So it's not just a tiny difference, but a significant disparity, you're saying, a big imbalance.
Often, yes, a noticeable difference.
Like you can sit down with an English book, maybe a novel, and understand almost everything, follow the plot, the characters.
Feel quite comfortable.
Yeah, or listen to a conversation like this one, hopefully, and follow along perfectly. But then when it's your turn to speak, maybe summarize the plot or share your opinion, you feel this massive disparity between your comprehension and your ability to actually express yourself.
That's it, perfectly.
It's like your understanding is this vast ocean, but your ability to speak is just, I don't know, a small paddling pool sometimes.
That's a powerful analogy and spot on. It is a noticeable, sometimes quite demotivating imbalance.
Demotivating, yes.
And often there's a feeling of disconnect involved. A disconnect means a lack of connection, an interruption, or a feeling of separation. It describes a gap between things that maybe should be connected, or just that feeling of detachment.
I totally get that. Like a disconnect between what a company promises in its advertising and the actual product or service you receive.
Yes, that's a common one.
Or feeling a disconnect from a friend if you haven't seen them in a while. Maybe your lives have gone in different directions.
That emotional or social disconnect.
And for language, it's that really annoying disconnect between your brain, which knows the word, you're sure it does.
It's in there somewhere.
And your mouth, which just can't quite make it come out when you're trying to speak. It feels like two separate systems that aren't communicating properly with each other.
That's a very common feeling.
It's like you have this rich inner world of understanding all these thoughts and ideas, but a much more limited ability to broadcast it outwards.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture then, the knowing-doing gap is essentially the disparity between your often quite strong receptive skills and your developing productive skills.
Okay, receptive versus productive.
Your receptive skills are all about understanding and interpreting language. Like when you're listening to this deep dive right now, or reading an online article or watching a film, you're receiving information, taking it in.
So reading a book, watching a movie, listening to podcasts, that's all building my receptive skills, right? Taking information in.
Right.
And then productive skills are when you're creating language yourself, like writing an email, giving a presentation, or the big one, speaking spontaneously in a conversation.
That's where the challenge often lies, as you say. It's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads us directly to the idea of passive knowledge or passive vocabulary. This is the knowledge or the specific words that you recognize when you see or hear them.
Okay.
But you don't actively produce or use them yourself in your own conversation or writing. You might recognize the word laborious, for instance.
Laborious, meaning like requires a lot of effort and time.
Exactly. You see it in a text, you understand it means something difficult and time-consuming. But you don't spontaneously use it yourself when describing, say, a difficult task at work.
Right. I might just say, it was really hard, or it took a long time.
Precisely. That laborious is sitting in your passive vocabulary.
So you know what it means when you encounter it. It resonates with you. You understand the meaning in context.
Yes, the recognition is there.
But it's not something you naturally reach for when you're speaking. It's sitting there somewhere in your brain, ready to be understood, but it's not active. It's like having a tool in your toolbox that you recognize, you know what it is, but you don't quite remember how to pick it up and use it effectively when you actually need it.
That's a perfect analogy. A tool you see but don't use. And this is completely normal in language acquisition. We should stress that.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Absolutely. The goal of this deep dive, and language learning in general, is to empower you to gradually move words from your passive vocabulary into your active vocabulary. But the question is, why do we get stuck there? What are some of these common roadblocks that stop us from using the words we know and feeling that smooth, confident flow in conversation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What are those metaphorical roadblocks, those obstacles that prevent progress, stopping us from unleashing our active vocabulary? Like actual traffic roadblocks that stop you from reaching your destination on time.
Frustrating.
Or unexpected problems that pop up in a big project. In language learning, what are the mental blocks that make us hesitate, that make us, well, fall short sometimes?
Well, one of the biggest roadblocks, and one many learners aren't even fully aware they're doing, is the mental translation process.
Translating in your head?
Yes. This is the common, often subconscious habit of thinking first in your native language and then translating word for word into the target language, into English in this case, before you actually speak.
Yeah.
It feels like it should help, maybe because you're trying to be precise, find the exact right word.
Control the output?
Yeah, control. But it's often really unhelpful because it creates a huge bottleneck in your communication.
Oh, we've all done this, especially early on. It really undermines your natural flow, doesn't it?
Completely.
It's like trying to say, I am going to the store by meticulously thinking, yo soy ir a la tienda, or whatever your native language equivalent is, mapping each word across.
Instead of just accessing the English phrase directly.
Exactly. It becomes a massive bottleneck, slowing everything right down. Think of it literally, like traffic trying to squeeze through a single lane on a busy highway that suddenly narrows.
Causes a huge sham.
Right. Or a slow internet connection can create a bottleneck for your entire team's online work. It just impedes progress significantly, stops the flow.
You've described that perfectly. That mental translation process can really become a major bottleneck, making your speech halting, unnatural, and full of pauses. And this often leads directly to excessive hesitation.
Excessive hesitation. Okay.
Which is exactly what it sounds like. Too much pausing or delaying before speaking, often stemming from that uncertainty or, crucially, fear.
Right.
You see this a lot in new speakers, don't you?
Right.
That long, sometimes awkward, drawn-out pause before almost every sentence or phrase as their brain tries to process the translation or search for the perfect word.
It's like you're constantly second-guessing yourself in those pauses, isn't it?
That's a huge part of it.
Reconsidering a decision, doubting your choice of words, constantly questioning your own choices before you even speak them aloud. Like sending an important email and then immediately second-guessing the tone. Was it too direct? Too informal?
Yes. Or agonizing over it beforehand.
Or constantly changing your mind about an outfit right before you leave the house. That continuous self-doubt must be incredibly exhausting mentally, and it truly undermines your confidence over time.
It absolutely does. It chips away at it. And this second-guessing, this excessive hesitation, can ultimately lead to what we sometimes call paralysis. Not literal paralysis, of course.
No, metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically, yes. It's a state of being unable to move or act, or in our case, being unable to speak due to overwhelming fear or hesitation. The fear of making a mistake can be absolutely paralyzing.
Wow, paralyzing. That's a strong word.
It is, but it captures the feeling. Imagine standing on a stage, maybe you have to give a short presentation, and suddenly your mind goes completely blank and you're gripped by this paralyzing fear, unable to utter a single word. That's speaking paralysis.
Like stage fright taken to the extreme.
Exactly. It's similar in feeling to decision paralysis when you have, say, too many choices on a menu or too many options for a project, and you just freeze, unable to pick one.
Okay, I see the connection. So if that's the feeling, that paralyzing hesitation, what's the culprit behind it all? You mentioned fear. Is that the main cause?
That's a really important question. What causes all this hesitation and, in extreme cases, paralysis? Often it originates from something psychologists and linguists call the affective filter.
Affective filter. Okay, sounds technical.
It sounds a bit technical, but the concept is quite simple. Imagine your brain has a kind of protective barrier, maybe like a bouncer at the door of a club.
Okay, a bouncer for my brain.
Sort of. If you're feeling stressed, anxious, self-conscious, worried about making mistakes, worried about what others think, that bouncer, your affective filter, gets really strict. It becomes high. It keeps new language from entering your brain effectively, so learning is harder, and it definitely prevents you from freely using the language you already know, the language you've already learned. It blocks the output, too.
So it works both ways, input and output.
Yes, it's a mental barrier caused by negative emotions, anxiety, low motivation, lack of confidence, preventing comprehensible input from being processed fully, and also hindering your ability to produce output.
Wow, so it's not just about what you know, but profoundly how you feel about using it. That's huge.
It's incredibly significant.
If you're too preoccupied with sounding perfect, or you're self-conscious about your accent, or maybe you had a bad experience being corrected once.
All those things raise the filter.
That bouncer, that affective filter just slams the door shut, metaphorically speaking. And then the embarrassment of making a mistake, or even just the fear of potential embarrassment, contributes to making that filter high even stronger.
Absolutely. Feeling self-conscious means having this undue awareness of yourself, worrying constantly about how others perceive you. And embarrassment is that feeling of shame or awkwardness after you think you've made a social blunder.
These feelings are totally normal and valid, as you said earlier. Everyone feels them sometimes. But they can create a real cognitive barrier too, can't they? It feels like it's not just emotional, that it actually affects your ability to think clearly and process information.
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
A cognitive barrier is an obstacle in the mental processes of understanding and processing information, while the affective filter is more about your emotional state influences learning and production.
How you
Right. A cognitive barrier is more about the actual processing itself being hindered. Perhaps stress makes it physically hard to think clearly. Your brain feels foggy, or anxiety makes it difficult to retrieve facts or words you actually know.
So they're linked, but slightly different.
Exactly. Both contribute to that struggle. And when you're constantly preoccupied with making mistakes or feeling self-conscious, it can truly undermine your confidence. And undermine is a key verb here. It means to weaken something gradually, to erode it from beneath.
Like constantly criticizing a child can undermine their self-esteem over time.
Perfect example. It weakens their belief in themselves, slowly but surely.
And then your fear, that constant worry, can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, can it?
Explain that a bit more.
Well, a self-fulfilling prophecy is when a prediction, just by being made, actually causes itself to become true. So if you're so afraid of failing, so convinced you'll make mistakes when you speak.
You hesitate, you get anxious.
Yeah. You might avoid speaking altogether, or when you do speak, you're so tense that you do make more mistakes, thus guaranteeing the failure you predicted. Your belief made it happen.
Spot on. That's exactly it. When you're constantly preoccupied with making mistakes or feeling self-conscious, it can undermine your confidence, making you hesitant and anxious, which in turn can make your fear of failure a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow. That's a powerful cycle.
It is. And this whole experience can be incredibly demotivating. It makes you less enthusiastic about learning and practicing. Why bother if you always feel bad?
Right.
And if you consistently feel like your efforts fall short, fail to meet the expectation or standard you set for yourself, that's also incredibly demotivating. It feels like you're putting in the work, but not getting the results.
It's a really vicious cycle, isn't it? Fear leads to hesitation, which leads to mistakes or avoidance, which confirms the fear and lowers motivation.
Precisely. And that's the cycle we want to help you break.
That's why addressing these emotional roadblocks, these affective filters and cognitive barriers is so important. We don't want anyone listening to feel demotivated or like their genuine efforts are falling short because of these very normal, very human feelings.
Exactly.
This deep dive is about giving you the tools and the understanding to break through that negativity and transform your learning journey into something more positive and effective.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Because what we want to move towards is deep, functional understanding, not just, superficial knowledge.
Superficial, like just on the surface?
Exactly. We've all tried to cram for an exam last minute, right? To force a lot of information into your head quickly, usually without much real understanding.
Oh, yeah. All-nighters fueled by coffee.
Yes. It's like stuffing too many clothes into a suitcase just before a trip. You might get it closed, but it's not organized and things get wrinkled.
And you probably can't find anything when you arrive. So you cram for the test, but does that knowledge really stick? Does it become deeply embedded in your long-term memory?
Not usually, right? You might pass the test, maybe.
Hopefully.
But then the next day or a week later, it's mostly gone. You've only learned it superficially, just on the surface. And that kind of knowledge isn't going to help you much in real, spontaneous conversations.
No, definitely not. If you just cram words, you're only learning them superficially, and they won't be ready for active use when you need them. It's like painting over a crack in the wall without actually fixing the underlying structural issue.
Great analogy. It looks good for a moment, maybe, but it won't last. It's not a real solution.
It's not deep learning.
You're absolutely right. And that's why we often use the analogy of a leaky bucket. Learning vocabulary without regular review, without active engagement and use, is like trying to fill a leaky bucket.
Ah, the leaky bucket. I can picture that.
You pour in new words. Maybe you learn 20 words from a list one night. You expend a lot of effort.
You feel productive.
You feel like you're making progress. But then, because you're not using them, not reviewing them effectively, they just disappear out the bottom, leak away. It's an ineffective process where the input is constantly lost, and your efforts can feel, well, almost useless sometimes.
That's a perfect analogy, because it feels like you're doing the work, you're expending time and energy, but you're not retaining it. The bucket never gets full.
Precisely.
So this is where that classic advice, quality over quantity, becomes paramount, doesn't it?
Paramount, yes. meaning it's of the greatest importance.
It's better to truly learn a few words deeply, understand their nuances, practice using them,
Really own them.
than to cram hundreds superficially, right? You should actively prioritize quality learning, treating it as more important, more central to your whole learning strategy.
Crucially, yes. Quality over quantity. Our ultimate goal here, the aim of all these strategies we'll discuss, is for you to be internalizing these words.
Internalizing, making them internal part of you.
Exactly. To internalize means to make something part of your own system of beliefs or knowledge, absorbing it so deeply that it becomes automatic, second nature. You don't have to consciously think about it anymore. It just flows intuitively.
Like internalizing a complex dance routine. At first, you have to think consciously about every single step, right?
Left foot, right foot, turn. Yeah.
But with enough practice, you internalize it, and you don't even have to think about the individual steps anymore. Your body just moves intuitively. Or maybe internalizing a new grammar rule so you don't consciously retrieve the rule every time you speak. You just use it correctly without thinking.
That's the goal.
So it's not just about knowing it intellectually, but building the mental highway, that fast connection to get to it quickly and intuitively.
That's an excellent way to put it, building the mental highway. When you internalize something, you're literally strengthening those neural pathways in your brain.
Neural pathways,
Yeah.
the connections between brain cells.
Exactly, the connections between neurons that allow signals, thoughts, and information to travel. Think of it like paving a rough dirt road. Every time you consciously and successfully use a word or phrase in context,
You lay another brick.
you're laying another brick, exactly,
Yeah.
making the path smoother, wider, faster. If you only recognize the word passively when you read or hear it, the road remains muddy, overgrown, and hard to navigate quickly when you need it for speaking.
Wow.
So the real insight here, I think, is that active use isn't just practice. It's literally rewiring your brain for fluency. It helps our overall cognitive abilities, our mental processes of perception, memory, reasoning, by streamlining our thinking processes for that language.
That's fascinating. So the method we choose to learn really informs how well we'll be able to use it, right? The way we learn influences or shapes our ability.
Absolutely. Informs here means it gives character or essence to, or provides the basis for, like how scientific research informs new government policies or how our past personal experiences inform our worldview and decisions now.
So the way you learn a word informs how deeply it's embedded, how functional it will become in your active use.
Exactly. And to truly internalize a word effectively, you need to understand its contextual meaning and all its subtle nuances, not just a single generic dictionary definition.
Contextual meaning, depending on the situation.
Right. Relating to the context, the surrounding information. The meaning often depends entirely on that context. Think about the word cool, for example.
Yeah.
It changes dramatically depending on the context, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the temperature outside?
Or saying something is trendy or fashionable.
Or even describing someone's calm demeanor under pressure. She stayed cool.
Right. 3 different meanings.
All depending on context. And then there are nuances, those subtle differences in meaning, expression, or tone, like the subtle nuances in someone's tone of voice that can completely change the meaning of their words, even if the words themselves are the same. Sarcasm, for example.
Ah, yes. The tone is everything sometimes.
Understanding that a word's meaning depends on the situation, the context, and that words carry these subtle distinctions, these nuances, that understanding is crucially important for truly effective, sophisticated communication.
That makes total sense. If you just cram words superficially from a list, you're not going to pick up on those contextual meanings or subtle nuances you need for real conversations.
Not likely, no.
Which brings us perfectly to activating your vocabulary and actually speaking with more confidence. We've talked a lot about the challenges, the roadblocks, the leaky buckets. So now let's dive deep into how we can actually uncover those words hiding in our passive vocabulary and use them with greater ease. Let's bridge that gap.
Perfect transition, because the whole point of this deep dive, as we said, is to help you bridge that gap, to reduce or overcome the disparity between your passive knowledge and your active use. We're working to connect those two things that might feel separated right now, moving from receptive input to confident, productive output.
So it's not just about consuming language like listening and reading, which is your input, but it's equally, maybe even more importantly for fluency, about producing language through speaking and writing. That's your output.
Exactly. It's about a dynamic exchange, not just one-way reception like filling that bucket, leaky or otherwise.
Right. It needs to flow both ways.
Precisely. While comprehensible input, that's language that you can understand, even if you don't know every single word, maybe because of the context or visuals, while that is paramount for initially acquiring language.
Paramount again, so really important.
Yes, very important for learning new things. But output, actually trying to use the language, is crucial for developing fluency and, interestingly, for identifying what you don't know yet.
How does output help you identify what you don't know?
Well, when you try to speak or write, you inevitably stumble sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You hesitate, you search for a word, maybe you can't quite formulate the sentence correctly.
Yes, that frustrating feeling again.
But that stumbling, that struggle, is actually good. That's your brain activating its noticing function.
Noticing function.
Yes, it's a cognitive process.
Yeah.
Your brain suddenly becomes aware of a gap in your knowledge or ability. It says, I need that specific word right now, and I don't have it. Or, I'm not sure how to structure this sentence correctly.
So that moment of struggle, that hesitation or that blank feeling is actually a signal from your brain, a good signal.
The very good signal. It's highlighting exactly where you need to focus your learning. It's like your brain is noticing a missing piece of the puzzle and sending up a little flare to get your attention.
Okay, so if my brain is saying, aha, or sending up a flare, what should I do in that moment or right after to capture that aha and make it stick? Is it about immediately looking up the word or trying to rephrase?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
What do you do with that noticing moment?
Well, several things can help. Immediately looking up the word or phrase, if possible, is excellent, yes. Capture it while it's fresh.
But also try to circumlocute or rephrase it in the moment, even if it feels a bit laborious or clumsy. That very effort of trying to express the idea differently strengthens the neural pathways related to that concept.
So don't just give up and go silent. Try to talk around it.
Exactly. And maybe keep a small struggle journal, just a note on your phone or a little notebook where you jot down those aha moments, those words or structures you struggled with. You can review them later, make a flashcard, consciously practice them.
I love that idea of a struggle journal. It reframes the frustration as a learning opportunity. Very positive.
It really does. It turns roadblocks into signposts. And beyond just noticing the gaps, every time you speak or write, you're essentially engaging your hypothesis testing function.
Hypothesis testing, like in science.
Kind of. You're testing a hypothesis, a proposed explanation or assumption about how the English language works. You're thinking, perhaps subconsciously, if I say it this way, using this word or this grammar, will they understand me? Is this correct?
Ah, I see. So you try something out.
You try it out, and the feedback you get, maybe a nod of understanding from the listener, maybe a confused look, maybe a gentle correction, or maybe just your own feeling of whether it sounded right. That feedback helps you adjust your hypothesis for next time.
That's brilliant. So you're constantly experimenting with the language in real time and learning from the results. It's like conducting thousands of tiny scientific experiments with your mouth every day.
It truly is.
Yeah.
You're actively engaging with the language in a really meaningful trial and error way, which is how we learn most things, isn't it?
That's very true.
And then there's one more function related to output, the metalinguistic function.
Metalinguistic.
Yeah.
Thinking about language.
Exactly. This is where you start to consciously reflect on the language itself. You think, why did that sentence sound a bit wrong? Or how could I formulate that thought more clearly or elegantly next time? This is the conscious reflection on language structure, word choice, grammar rules, the nuances of expression.
So output isn't just practice, it's triggering all these crucial learning processes, noticing gaps, testing hypotheses, and reflecting on the language itself.
Precisely. This powerful combination of receiving comprehensible input and actively producing output helps you truly acquire the language. And acquire here often implies learning something naturally, letting it become a deeply embedded part of you, not just something you cram or learn superficially for a test. You're building true, lasting proficiency and competence.
So it's not just about studying the rules from a textbook, but truly acquiring the language, letting it become part of you organically, almost intuitively through use. This is exciting. So let's get practical. What are some specific tools and techniques we can use to really activate our vocabulary, moving it from that passive state to being truly functional and embedded in our active use?
Okay, practical techniques. One really great technique, especially for improving pronunciation, flow, and bypassing that mental translation bottleneck, is called shadowing.
Shadowing, like following someone closely.
Exactly. With shadowing, you listen to a native speaker, perhaps, from a podcast like this, an audiobook, a YouTube video, anything really, and you try to mimic their pronunciation, their intonation, their rhythm simultaneously.
Simultaneously. As in at the exact same time.
Almost at the exact same time, yes. maybe just a fraction of a second behind them. You speak along with them, like their echo or their shadow. It feels strange at first.
It sounds a bit strange, like you're talking over someone, but I can see how it would be effective. You're not focused on what to say. The content is given to you.
Right, the cognitive load is lower.
You're just focusing on how to say it.
Mm.
It must really help your mouth muscles, your tongue, your ear get used to the new sounds, the intonation patterns, the natural flow of spoken English without the pressure of creating your own sentences from scratch.
That's precisely the point.
It's like mimicking a professional singer to learn a song, right? You're training your vocal cords in your ear by copying the expert. And you said it helps bypass translation and helps you practice formulating sentences more quickly without all that second guessing.
Precisely. Because you're forced to keep up, you don't have time to translate. Shadowing helps you practice formulating sentences and thoughts more quickly, getting used to common structures and rhythms. It helps develop or express ideas systematically, almost like using prefabricated units, which we'll touch on more in a moment.
Prefabricated units, like ready-made phrases.
Exactly. And the more you practice shadowing, the more articulately you'll eventually be able to express your own ideas. Articulately means speaking with clear pronunciation and clear, effective expression of ideas. Your overall articulation improves.
That's the dream, isn't it? Speaking clearly, effectively, precisely. So how do we make this shadowing or any act of practice a consistent habit? How do we cultivate this regular practice? That seems key.
It is absolutely key. Consistency trumps intensity often. You need to consciously cultivate these habits of active practice to see real progressive progress over time. To cultivate means to intentionally foster or develop a skill, a habit, or even a relationship over time. Like cultivating good study habits or cultivating a garden, it requires regular attention and effort.
Not just once in a while.
No. And crucially, break down your goals into manageable chunks. Make it easy to start. Don't try to learn 50 new words at once by Friday or shadow for an hour every day if you're just starting. That's just asking for overwhelm and that leaky bucket situation again.
Setting yourself up to fail almost.
Right. Make it something you can actually handle and accomplish without great difficulty, something that feels achievable and sustainable. Perhaps aiming to learn and actively use 3 to 5 new words or phrases a week, or shadowing for just 5-10 minutes a day. That's manageable.
That's great advice. Small, consistent efforts add up and feel much less laborious or overwhelming. We want our vocabulary to be truly functional. In the end, something you can actually use effectively in your everyday communication, not just something you admire from afar on a word list.
Functional, designed to be practical and useful. That's the goal.
Like furniture that is functional rather than just purely decorative. Language that allows you to communicate effectively, even if it's not absolutely perfect yet.
Exactly. And another very effective strategy for making your vocabulary truly functional and for speaking more fluently is to think of common phrases or expressions as prefabricated linguistic units.
Prefabricated, like houses built in sections in a factory.
Precisely that idea, applied to language. Instead of building every single sentence word by word from scratch, which is slow and prone to error, especially when translating.
Like a monolingual person might do more intuitively without thinking about it.
Right. For a learner, learning common chunks like, on the other hand, as far as I'm concerned, looking forward to hearing from you. How's it going? Learning these prefabricated units as single blocks helps you bypass that laborious word-by-word mental translation process.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea. It's like having pre-built Lego pieces ready to snap together in your conversation instead of having to find and connect every tiny individual brick every single time you want to say something.
Exactly. It speeds things up immensely.
You're not trying to create everything from individual bricks, which is often where you might struggle, hesitate, and maybe have to circumlocute.
Spot on. You used the perfect word there. Circumlocute is exactly what happens when your active vocabulary falls short, when you don't have that prefabricated chunk or the specific word readily available. You have to talk around a subject because the precise word is forgotten or unknown.
Like describing an object without knowing its name? You know, that thing you use to open bottles instead of corkscrew?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or like my example from earlier, when I couldn't instantly remember the word squirrel, I had to circumlocute and say that bushy-tailed animal that climbs trees and collects nuts.
It gets the message across eventually, but it's not very efficient or elegant, is it?
Not at all. So our goal is to help you expand your active repertoire, that stock of skills, abilities, words, and phrases that you habitually use, so you have more tools, more prefabricated units at your disposal, and you don't have to circumlocute quite so often.
Makes sense. We hope these examples and explanations we're using resonate with you listening, making the words feel more real and personal, striking a chord with your own experiences, and ultimately making them easier to remember and use.
And that leads us directly to the real power of active engagement in this process. The more you consciously practice with full awareness and intention, deliberately using new words, trying techniques like shadowing,
Even when it feels a bit forced at first.
especially when it feels a bit forced, the more you do that, the more these words and structures will eventually become intuitive.
Yeah.
You'll just know them and use them automatically without conscious reasoning or effort. It shifts from deliberate, sometimes laborious effort to instinctive, natural use, much like how you speak your native language.
So this whole process of learning, ideally, should feel organic over time, right? Developing naturally and gradually, constantly reinforcing your understanding and your ability to use the words through practice.
Exactly. Organic growth, not forced cramming. And reinforcing, strengthening, and supporting what you've learned. It's like a business growing organically, strengthening its roots in the local market and expanding its reach steadily over time. Or like physically reinforcing a wall with more material to make it stronger. Every time you use a word correctly, you're reinforcing that neural pathway.
It's not forced, but a steady, natural growth built on consistent effort.
Yes, and remember that language learning is a multifaceted journey. It has many different aspects or dimensions: listening, speaking, reading, writing, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, culture.
So many facets.
Exactly. All these skills need to work together. Our goal is for this vocabulary we're discussing and the strategies for learning it to become deeply embedded in your mind.
Embedded, like fixed firmly inside.
Yes, fixed firmly and deeply, incorporated as an essential, integrated part of your linguistic system, like cultural values that are deeply embedded in a society, or a fossil embedded firmly in rock. We want these words ready to use, deeply integrated.
And focusing on high-frequency words must help with that embedding process, right?
Absolutely. Focusing your active learning efforts on words and phrases that occur often, that you'll encounter and have opportunities to use frequently, naturally helps with embedding them more deeply into your active repertoire. You're constantly getting that reinforcement through exposure and practice.
It makes sense to prioritize the words you'll actually use most.
It gives you the best return on your time investment. And understanding these vocabulary nuances and being able to use words accurately and appropriately in context gives you incredible leverage in your communication.
Leverage, like using a lever to lift something heavy. An advantage.
Exactly. It gives you power, influence, and advantage you can use to achieve your communication goals more effectively. You can express yourself more precisely, sound more credible, connect better with people. It's like having a stronger toolkit or a longer lever.
It's like having a communication superpower. You're empowered to express yourself more precisely, more confidently, and with greater impact.
It really can feel that way. And ultimately, consistent active practice, using techniques like shadowing, learning chunks, focusing on quality over quantity, all this will lead to greater proficiency and competence in English.
Proficiency and competence, meaning a high level of skill and the ability to do things successfully.
That's right. Proficiency often implies a high degree of skill, while competence is the basic ability to do something successfully or efficiently. Consistent practice builds both over time. It's a journey of continuous improvement, not a sudden destination.
Okay.
And just to reiterate one point, because it's so important, crucially, giving output primacy in your practice is key to moving words from passive to active.
Output primacy, meaning giving priority to speaking and writing.
Yes, making the act of producing language, of speaking and writing, your most important focus, your primary activity. Even if it feels a little awkward or scary or laborious at first, that's how you truly solidify your learning. Overcome that affective filter, notice the gaps, test your hypotheses, and make the words genuinely functional. Don't judge your progress prematurely. Either don't expect perfection overnight. Language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient with yourself.
That's such an important reminder. Output primacy, focus on using it. Wow, we've really gone on a deep dive today, haven't we? We've covered so much ground.
We certainly have.
From those infuriating moments when words just vanish into thin air, to understanding the knowing-doing gap, the effective filter with its mental bouncer,
The bouncer, yes.
all the way to how to strengthen your neural pathways by using output and how to cultivate a truly functional repertoire using techniques like shadowing and learning prefabricated chunks. We've explored so many ways to make vocabulary stick and become truly active.
Absolutely. And if there's one core message to take away, it's that the goal isn't just passive understanding, it's active, confident application. We've identified that common, universal knowing-doing gap and hopefully shown you practical ways to start bridging that gap.
Yeah.
Remember, every single time you try to use a new word or phrase, even if you hesitate, even if you have to circumlocute it first, you're not just practicing speaking. You're actively engaging your noticing function, your hypothesis testing function. You're reinforcing those crucial neural pathways, and you're actively building your linguistic repertoire. It's powerful stuff happening in your brain.
That's a great way to reframe the struggle. It's actually your brain doing important work. It might feel a little awkward at first, though, to consciously use these new words or to try shadowing out loud. That's perfectly normal, right?
Absolutely normal. Expected, even.
So don't let that initial feeling of self-consciousness or awkwardness become a paralyzing, effective filter. It's okay to stumble. It's okay if it doesn't sound perfect immediately. That's honestly how you learn and grow. We've all been there.
Precisely.
Yep.
You are already taking massive steps to cultivate more effective communication just by listening to this, by being curious, by wanting to improve. Practice makes progress. Remember, not necessarily perfection right away. You're already on your way to mastering this vocabulary just by engaging with it, and that's something to be genuinely excited about.
That's very encouraging.
And the best way, truly the best way, to master vocabulary is to start using it. Try integrating these words we discussed today into your daily conversations or your writing. Whether you're discussing a book you read, talking about your day, expressing your feelings, look for opportunities. Make it an organic part of your life.
Okay, so let's give our listeners a concrete challenge then. For this week's challenge, pick at least 3, maybe even 5, of the words or expressions we discussed today, perhaps infuriating, internalize, and cultivate, or maybe bottleneck, disparity, and resonance. Choose ones that, well, resonate with you.
Good choices.
And actively try to use them in your conversations or writing this week. Think of real-life scenarios where they would fit naturally. It could be describing how infuriating it was when your internet connection became a bottleneck.
Yes.
Or talking about how you're trying to internalize a new skill for work, or even how you're trying to cultivate patience with a laborious task. Find real contexts.
That's a great challenge. And then if you feel comfortable, share your sentences or experiences with us on social media. We genuinely love hearing how you're putting these deep dives into practice. Your examples help us too. They reinforce our own understanding and give us new ideas.
Definitely. We learn from you too.
Before we finish, here's a final thought to ponder. Consider this. What other roadblocks, perhaps emotional or mental, that you have subconsciously created in your own language learning journey? And thinking about everything we discussed today, how can you consciously start to bypass them? Maybe one new word, one active conversation, one small step at a time.
Ooh, that's a deep one. Something fascinating to chew on until our next deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Keep practicing.